Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's the regular assembly meeting for June 6, 2016. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Here.
Bart?
Here.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Cindy?
Here.
Okay, it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes from the May 16th meeting. Is this not working?
Yeah.
Does it just need to be
Just need to
turned
bring
up?
it closer to you, Mark.
Oh, well, right in my face. All right, perfect. Okay, entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from May 16th. So move. Second.
Do we need to turn it up?
Maybe it's because my hearing aids are turned up, I could hear it quite well, but we'll try that, but I don't want to chew on it. Okay, there's been a motion made and a second. Is there any changes, or are those meeting minutes acceptable? All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, now we're down to today's meeting agenda. I'd entertain, oh, now it's working. I'll entertain a motion to, for approval of today's meeting agenda.
I so move. Second.
Any amendments or changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, public hearings. We're having another public hearing today on the marijuana ordinance. That's ordinance 2016-06. It's an ordinance adding marijuana regulations to Chapter 6.04, alcoholic beverages and marijuana. And later in the meeting, if you'll look farther on in the agenda, you'll see that we're going to take action on it as an assembly to vote whether it's going to be on the ballot this fall or not. So I know there's some controversy there, but so if you want to include anything about that in your presentation under the public hearing, you could feel free to do so. So I see there's quite a few people in the room, so if you want to speak to the marijuana ordinance in this public hearing, just raise your hand and come forward. Let's just start at the front here, the lady in the red shirt.
Can I do it? Do you want me to do it? Yeah, you.
Either way, try to make it brief if you could. It looks like, how many people were wanting to testify to this? There's something on the agenda. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There's about 15 or so. So if we could try to limit it to 3 minutes, and it probably won't stay that way, but we'll probably end up eating up an hour, which is fine. That's what we're here for. All right, Marjorie, if you want to.
In May,
You need to come forward.
Yes.
Yeah, come forward to the microphone, state your name, who you represent. Thank you.
I represent me.
Can you state your name, please?
Well, Marge Oinus.
Thank you, Marge.
Okay. In May of this past year, on the 2nd, I went to Anchorage to visit a friend, and she was there to attend the addictions conference that was held for the state of Alaska. And she invited me to come, and so I asked permission to go, and the boss of the conference said, you can go to one session. And I said, well, it's the first, I'll just go to the first one, whatever that is. The first one was, surprisingly, on marijuana. And the fellow that spoke was excellent, and I thought, my goodness, our city is dealing with this issue right now. How fortunate that I could be there. I have pages of notes. I've looked on the internet, as probably all of you have, for pros and cons. And I'm appealing to the council that we have that you give us the option to opt out of having the commercial sale of marijuana. But I wanted to be a help in deciding that, they have this conference published a DVD that's 26 minutes long, and it is coming out the third week of June. I called them a couple days ago and I said, our town is discussing this, and they said, I will put your name at the top of the list to get the DVD. I wanted to give you a copy. Just take one and pass it around. This is a copy of the advertisement. It is entitled Cannibalized, the Physical and Mental Effects of Marijuana. And I would like to show it to the council. I would like to show it to the police. It's the most up-to-date thoughts on marijuana. And I would like to show it to the whole city, to the churches, to the police department, and just maybe show it at the auditorium so that we can all, at least, I have no idea what it says. I don't know if it's in agreement with what my position is, but I was very impressed with the speaker, and so I'd like to offer that as something that we could all look at, and just ask that you would consider that, if the council would consider watching it whenever I get it. And so I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Marge. So maybe we'll just start on this side of the room and continue back through the tables. So let's do it that way and keep in order. Excuse me.
Hello, my name is Cindy Lynn. I've lived in Petersburg only 22 years. I'm legally blind, so if someone wishes to ask me a question, if someone can help me with that, I'd sure appreciate it. I was surprised to learn only on Friday about the full marijuana initiative text. And the fact that on 17.38.110 on page 6, as far as the opt-out, what that exactly means is a local government may prohibit the operation of marijuana cultivation facilities, marijuana product manufacturing facilities, marijuana testing facilities, or retail marijuana stores. Let's see. Through the enactment of an ordinance or by a voter initiative. And that would, of course, be called the opt-out initiative, I would think. I've talked to as many people as I could. I personally, in the 60s, of course, in college, I think I had 2 joints. And that's it for me, so I don't really know anything about it as far as people that use it regularly. If you decide to, if you decide to go along with the concept of marijuana in a retail outlet, I pray and plead with you to please make that only able outside of Area 1, which is the old city limits, which is outside of 8.6 mile. That way people that do need marijuana for medical reasons or personal reasons, this initiative would in no way stop people from having 1 ounce of marijuana in their home or growing 6 plants, 3 of which are budding. I don't know exactly what that means, but other people would. And I asked, okay, an ounce, how much is that? And the person I asked said, I don't know. I said, well, how many joints would that be? And he said, about 12. And that helped me have some idea because I'm really not knowledgeable on such things. But if you do decide to skip the opt-out part, please have it out of the town. I am worried on our town's reputation and image. I've always thought this is the best community I have ever been in my entire life, and I've traveled a great deal. I think it will have a negative effect on tourism. Now, some people believe that having outlets in town that tourists would come here to actually buy marijuana, because in Petersburg you can buy it. I don't think that would happen, and I question if they could even take it back, and maybe you could help me with this, to the tour boat legally, since it's a federal law. Marijuana cannot be transported through boats, the post office, or airlines. I don't know if people could buy marijuana and take it aboard a ferry, an Alaska Marine ferry. Let's see. I think that's about all I wanted to say. I wanted the public to know that this is an 11-page text, this initiative. It's not simple. It's not an easy process. If it is a go and you guys decide to do it, I'm sure you're aware of all the steps that need to be taken. I have no idea. I would think it would take a long time to get this really put together. A testing facility, a cultivation facility, a product facility, and then retail facilities. It's not like all of a sudden someone can say, I've got pot for sale. There's a lot more involved. And for the record, it is available on regulatemarijuanainalaska.org. And then it has 2 slashes and says full initiative text. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cindy. So it's my understanding that you would, what's your choice then if you were to address the assembly? Would you want this to be on the ballot in October for the public to vote on?
Yes, absolutely. An opt-out initiative. That still would allow, to my knowledge, I reread, the individuals can still grow their own and have in their own possession. I believe a person in their own home, if it's not against the law or unsafe, it should be an American right. And through this initiative, they have said absolutely people can smoke and possess in their own home. And I think that's good. I wish marijuana didn't exist, but it does, and people have been using it for a long, long time. So,
All right, thank you, Cindy, for your testimony. And maybe to make it clear, when you come up and testify, if you would just say if you're in favor of it on the ballot or not, and then for keeping a tally, it's easier that way than try to come up with their own idea on what you're trying to do. All right.
So my name's Gary Morgan, and I've applied for a license for marijuana cultivation on the island. I want to kind of address a couple things that the last speaker just spoke about. One, there's a lot of people that can't grow their own, that come down with cancer, have all kinds of reasons why they can't. It's not an easy plant necessarily to grow correctly. One thing that legalizing will do is it will allow a very regulated grow operation where there's no pesticides, there's no mold, there's nothing that can actually hurt you. Marijuana, you cannot die from it. You cannot physically smoke too much. There's been studies, it's not addictive. I'm a cigarette smoker, and I can tell you right now what addiction is. I try and quit every day. So marijuana is not the evil drug we put it out to be. There's been approximately, 80 years, 90 years, that there's been a campaign to rid this drug from the public consuming it, and it's really, I haven't smoked much in my life. Most of the times I've smoked it was when I was young, and I didn't like it. And it was just too strong for me. I didn't like the effects. But I also see my dad had cancer. He had a terrible time trying to get it when he had cancer, and it's not just for recreational use either. I think it's important that it's available, a safe product is available, and really what we're talking about here, we're talking about legalizing the sale to keep it out of minors' hands, selling it to, you can only be 21 to get it. If it's passed down from someone who bought it, that's illegal to a minor. That's still a criminal offense. All we're talking about here is taxing it, regulating it, and doing it in a safe way, and being able to test it to make sure it's safe for consumption. I know there's a lot of concern about the smoking in public or having a place to smoke on site. I've talked to Sue, who's working on the retail establishment in town. That's not a big priority for her. She would much rather just have a place where people can come and buy it. But I think we also have to think about the fact that there are some people who don't want to smoke at home, maybe have kids. There are visitors here in town. We do have some tourism. And no, you can't take it on a boat legally. But if you have small amounts, the way it works is you can only have a gram at a time if you're smoking on site. So, there's a lot of limitations and regulations to this. I don't think it's a bad thing to go forward with this. So I'm definitely not for the opt-out. And one last thing. I've already spent quite a bit of my personal money starting this business. It's really frustrating at this point, at this late hour, that we're discussing an opt-out financially. I'm an entrepreneur. This is something I think it's a good plant. If it was discovered today, this plant, I think it would be touted as a miracle drug. But that's just my opinion. So,
all right, thanks, Gary. Who wants to speak next? Sue, are you next in line on this side of the room?
My name is Suzanne Wood, and I'm representing myself here today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members, for this opportunity to present my views. With reference, I'm not for opting out.
Thank you.
With reference to Assembly Member Wohlhuter's list of questions, including under consumption, 1, should the Petersburg Borough opt out of recreational sales of marijuana, yes or no? Consider this rephrasing. Should the Petersburg Borough opt for continuation of status quo sales of drug cartel and or black market supplied recreational sales of marijuana into our community? Also under consumption on Assembly Member Wohlhuter's list of questions, number 2, should the Petersburg Borough allow the sales of medicinal marijuana, including sales, tinctures, sales, and concentrates into the downtown business district, yes or no? Consider this scenario. Imagine your personal need for medicinal marijuana oils and having to conceal such substances in vials in your wife's purse, evading detection by TSA screeners at the Seattle airport en route to Petersburg. Instead, doesn't it make more sense to avoid federal transportation oversight and be able to purchase legal marijuana in a state-licensed business that conforms with state law that is located directly across Nordic Drive from another state-licensed business with legal alcohol sales? And I again highly recommend the book Chasing the Dream by Johann Hari, detailing facts on America's war on drugs, its creation, and why it's failing, despite continued billions of dollars of U.S. Taxpayer funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, who would be next to speak? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent.
My name is Connor Kennedy, and I represent myself, and I am not in favor of the legalizing of commercial sales here in Petersburg. I have been smoking pot for 5 years, and it's probably the worst thing I've ever done for myself. I came up here to Petersburg to sober up, and this is honestly one of the best places I've been able to achieve that. It is a wholesome community. It is a good community with good values, and I remember smoking a lot before and after it became legal down in Seattle, where I'm from. And the entire city changed after it was legal, after people started selling it. For one, it was so much easier for me as a student to get it. I would buy an ounce from my buddies in school, probably every week, every 2 weeks. And as one of the people said that it's illegal for minors to get, that's never stopped anyone I know from getting it. I mean, and I know here, yeah, it's illegal for minors to get it, but they're still getting it. And I mean, if people want drugs, they're going to get drugs. And one thing I'm afraid of is that if we open up pot stores here in town, that it's the products that come in along with those pot stores. It's not just bud that they'd be selling, but it'd be those oils and those tinctures too. And I'd say one joint would probably have 12-20% THC when those oils have, I want to say, anywhere from 75 to 90%. It's pretty much the equivalent to whiskey compared to beer. And I mean, I know how much easier it was for me to get once it became legal down in Washington. I mean, I had many 21-year-old friends who would just go out and get it for me. You know, all I had to do was pay them. And it wrecked me in school. It just totally got rid of all ambition I had to move forward. It just completely, you know, just pretty much shut me off mentally. And I think it's a bad idea bringing it here to a town that's so great. And just, you know, that's one thing I loved, is how positive this town is, and how, you know, how good it was for me to stay sober and not be constantly reminded of what it was that I was moving away from down in Washington, down in Seattle. When it became legal and stores started selling it, and more stores started selling paraphernalia surrounding it, it's just like all these people just started coming out of the cracks. Suddenly, you know, we see people smoking on the side of the road, and we see just, you know, people high who can't even function, really, just every day. And people say it's not addictive. Well, food is addictive and TV is addictive. I don't believe that this drug itself is not addictive. I mean, I'm physical evidence that that drug is very addictive. And it is, in fact, a gateway drug, although some people say that it's not. I believe that it does open up to a drug culture, and that is what opens up to other things, you know. I smoked pot before I started drinking alcohol, but after that it led to more and more things. And, you know, coming up here, I just loved how clean the environment was. I mean, yeah, I've seen hard evidence that there are teenagers who are still drinking. There are teenagers who are smoking pot. And, I mean, it kind of hurts my heart to see that, just because I've been in that situation, and it's pushed me to a point where, shoot, I almost lost my will to live, really, just because I thought I was happy, and I really wasn't. And I was so ridiculously depressed, just constantly smoking pot, that it became an addiction. It got to a point where I'd have to...
Can you wrap it up, please, Connor? It's been 5 minutes. We're trying to restrict it to 3. I hate to cut anybody off, but we have a lot of people here to speak.
I just know that I couldn't function without smoking that. And I think it would be quite a mistake to make it more accessible here in Petersburg.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, who's next to speak?
I'm Marita Davis, and I am representing myself and the generations after of my family. I am for putting this on the ballot, and that's what I am addressing. And the Smoke-Free Air Act in our community, how was it decided? It was decided by vote. It was decided by the people. And it should not just be something that is amended or taken or thrown out and tossed by an assembly. Executive action. We see a lot of executive action lately. And it should be listen to the voice of the people. Just put it on the ballot. Let us decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita.
Sorry, I cut from the other side of the room, but I have to go to work soon.
That's fine.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Tremblay. I'm representing myself. I grew up in Petersburg, graduated class of '06, and I moved home in 2013. I'm excited to be in my hometown talking about our future and the new industries that could come from legal marijuana. So thank you for all your work on this issue. I know it's been a lot of time and maybe a few headaches. The state of Alaska had the third highest voter turnout in the nation in 2014. So yeah, it was lower than in a presidential year, and maybe some of the people in this community forgot to vote, and so they feel like they didn't have their say on that issue. But right now, pot is legal in the state, and 58% of those who showed up in Petersburg agreed that we should legalize it. Only 440 people voted for the city smoking ban. So if we're going by low voter count, then there shouldn't be a smoking ban. We have elections, they happen, and then we deal with the consequences. So right now the question is, how do we regulate it? Which I don't think is what should be on the ballot. That's what committee meetings, zoning meetings, all of these meetings over the last year have been for. I feel like we're having the discussions. This is great. Again, thank you so much for all of your time on this issue, because again, there have been meetings, there have been planning and zoning, there's public health, we have the places where we can be making this policy happen. And I feel like Petersburg already had the vote. So I feel like saving time and money, keeping it off the ballot would be good. I'm in favor of allowing retail businesses to sell marijuana in business districts, not allowing retail sales, allow the underground market to continue to flourish. People have mentioned the nightmare scenarios of down south, and I've been to a dispensary in Washington, and I saw an ID requiring business in an appropriately zoned space, selling a product with regulated strength and packaging, screened for safety, and sold by professionals. The reason marijuana has earned the reputation as a gateway drug is because you typically have to go to the underground to get it, leading you to come into more contact with other items on the black market. Let's bring more people out of the shadows and find a way to keep everyone in our community safe. There is an opportunity for increased tourism and business with this kind of product, and I'm intrigued to see what entrepreneurs in town are going to keep it going. So for me, the questions about smoking inside, balance can be found between employee safety and allowing people a safe place to consume what is now a legal product in the state of Alaska. But again, this is an issue for planning and zoning, or public safety, or the pot committee, not really for right now, not in this detail on the ballot. Lots of people are talking about drug use and addiction in this community, which is great. We need more resources and support for people seeking help, and we have a lot of them already in this community. And we also need a lot of compassion for the people that are struggling and are fighting this battle every day. But people looking to get high will do anything: aerosol cans, paint thinner, mouthwash, stealing prescription medication, you name it. Ask our police force and medical professionals. If there's a way to get high in this town, people have found it, and they've probably seen the evidence of it. That, however, is a different discussion than what we're trying to have right now. We're not in the age of reefer madness. More people are seeing marijuana for what it is: a relatively safe product that allows some people to have fun, helps some people in their health struggles, sometimes just makes folks dizzy or gives them a headache, and actually has been the most dangerous when it's been used as a way to send people to prison and ruin their lives. So let's focus on how we can bring an industry out of the shadows in appropriate venues, like zoning committee meetings, and not in frivolous actions like ballots. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, who's next? If we need to jump back on the Doesn't matter as long as everybody gets to speak.
My name's Rick Fish. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and a few of my neighbors down on the harbor. I live aboard my boat. I've been here for slightly over 4 years. Unfortunately, I wasn't born here, but I did have the good sense to choose to come here. On the ballot, it's a little unclear, I think, to most of us in town what precisely is going to be on the ballot. The initiative that was passed with a great deal of out-of-state support and money to support the issue was to legalize marijuana and then lay out many options. Each community could do what they wanted to do and set it up the way they wanted to set it up. We're quite happy accepting a dry village in the north. There's nothing wrong with that. We respect the culture of that community. This community also has a culture that I think needs to be respected. It's a sober, most of the time, community. And it's had a drug problem. I mean, Tent City, I've heard stories about that. End of the road issues, things like that. People come up here to do their thing. And we've worked it out. Drugs have been an issue with people for years. My family's had their problems, and I've had to live with it. My father died of cirrhosis right in front of me. But the initiative gave the options for the community to make decisions, and this is what we're trying to do now. But people could have voted for the initiative for all kinds of reasons, to avoid criminalization of a simple possession, or to look forward to having retail and open sales in an open community that is accepting of the marijuana culture. And that's the biggest issue we're trying to face right now, is if we're going to accept and endorse and embrace those people who are using this particular drug. We've got perfectly good sales for liquor and other things. We have parties with liquor on the street. That's not a problem. Are we going to have a marijuana den next to Keto's or next to the marijuana thing outside during Mayfest? Is this the kind of community that we want to be known as a marijuana retailing community? A quick question about the amending of the smoking ordinance. Previously, did we have an open package law? I mean, I thought it was inappropriate and illegal to have an open bottle of liquor on the street. Now, nothing in here that I read is going to prohibit smoking marijuana on the street. Is it in here? I didn't read it. I just read it.
In the state law.
It's in the state law to... Okay, so how does the state law deal with smoking marijuana on the street?
Cannot.
That's fine. So then we're going to have that. Okay, that was one of the issues, but I think the community, holding the community with a ballot, I mean, you're doing it right here on the docks. Do we want this dock? Do we want that dock? What do we want to do? I mean, none of us are clairvoyant. You can't tell what I'm thinking unless I come and tell you. All we're simply asking is to be asked what we want to do, whether we want to have it downtown, whether we want to have the retail thing limited at the ferry dock, we want to have it at Pappy's Landing, or you want to have it at Green's Camp. Most of us who are objecting to what appears to be a wide open situation would prefer a little more constraint. I mean, we're not going to put it near the school. Well, how far? The state came up with a number, and we bought into that, but we have the option of setting our own limits. So let us do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm Barbara Fish, representing myself and friends I've talked to, and the wife of the previous speaker. My main concern is with having a smoking environment downtown. If it's legal and that's fine, but do we have to have a smoking room right in downtown Petersburg? And I have been walking along the streets and behind people who smoke, and I can't even imagine what it would be like to smell somebody who comes out of that room. And somebody has to work in that environment, which is one of the reasons that smoke-free environments and workplaces have been put in, so the workers don't have to worry about secondhand smoke. I just have written down a few things as people have been talking, and I don't know enough about the opt-out to give you an answer whether I would want that on the ballot or not, but I am definitely against having any kind of smoking room legalized. And if you legalize pot smoking, why can't you smoke a cigarette or a cigar in that same environment? And I read a book called Weed the People, written by a gentleman in Seattle when they were, and I don't remember his name, but he was against legalizing it. Then he decided to vote for it. And the one thing that he mentioned in the book was he has teenage kids, and he said, please do not start smoking until you're out of your teenage years, because studies have been done that it does affect the brain of younger people. So that's my comment.
Okay, thanks, Barb. So your opinion is to put it on the ballot or not put it on the ballot? You didn't, sounds like you didn't.
Well, I don't know what's going to be on the ballot until I'm confused as to what actually is going to be on the ballot. I think having it legalized is fine, but having a smoking room, I would be completely against.
Okay.
So,
all right. Thank you. Who's next in line?
My name is Ross Nanik III. I represent myself. I hear everybody talking all kinds of scare tactics and stuff. You know, the only reason marijuana was banned and illegal in the first place was because in 1933, when alcohol was made legal, the head of the Department of Alcohol Prohibition wanted to keep his job. So, against all medical advice telling him there was nothing wrong with marijuana, there was nothing bad about it, he convinced the U.S. government and the governments around the world to ban it so he could keep his job. That's the only reason marijuana was made illegal. I'd like to address the gateway drug. The gateway drug is alcohol. They just did a study in Florida of underage students. 75% of them drank alcohol, while 42% smoked pot. Now, how does that compare to be the gateway drug? It's not. Alcohol is the gateway drug. Secondhand smoke. We've all seen the commercial. Cigarette smoke has 7,000 chemicals in it. Marijuana doesn't have anywhere near that number. So I speak in favor of any business that we would have here, you know, that would be legal, that would be regulated, and I feel is a waste of time to put it on the ballot.
Thank you, Ross, for your testimony. Whoever else would like to speak, just please come forward and state your name and who you represent.
My name is Dr. James Baker. I represent myself. I'd like to thank you for letting the public talk today. I would like to quote the Chief Administrative Judge of the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States of America, the Honorable Francis L. Young, and I quote, "Cannabis in its natural form is the safest therapeutic active substance known to man." Now, in pursuit of my doctorate, I did my master's thesis on the second toxicity effect of marijuana on the human body. And I couldn't agree more with Francis Young's statement of fact. And simplified, it can't be disputed. I believe there's no one in the listening range or in this room that has more credentials behind their name to dispute this fact. Okay? There seems to be some paranoia in town, primarily based on the past laws or the once illegal status of marijuana, and it's now legal. I think to try to prohibit a legal product makes you a prohibitionist, which I, as a veteran, have zero tolerance for. Anyone who loves liberty must oppose those who try to prohibit it. So I vote no for putting on the ballot to answer that question. Okay. Taxation. In my opinion, the borough, at the very least, should consider taxing the dispensary and the growers $25 an ounce. I believe that would at least potentially save one borough job and might create another, maybe more. Gateway drug. Ooh. I find it quite fascinating that the preferred treatment for methamphetamine and heroin addiction is marijuana oil extract, same as was used in 1900 to treat opium and morphine addiction. And for those young kids that totally bypass the marijuana gateway and go straight to Oxycontin, well, marijuana will help you too. Okay? Opt out. Why? You don't like it? Well, don't use it. Please. You know, I don't like cream corn. I don't use it. And it's legal too. Okay? Smoking in the dispensary. Well, I have seen plexiglass rooms with carbon filters in a dispensary in Vancouver, British Columbia. There was no outside smell. If there was music and dancing here, well, it might be a good night's entertainment, and other than that, I probably wouldn't go. So, in closing, I would like to share with the public one of the main therapeutic properties of marijuana. It relaxes the bowels. Recently, over the last year, I have met some moderately to severely constipated Petersburg citizens who would greatly benefit, both in body and in mind. Helps to relieve stinking thinking and will leave you feeling fresh as a daisy. Thank you.
Thanks, you, James. Whoever wants to come and speak next, just as long as everybody gets their turn.
I just got in from a long line trip, so I haven't been here I'm not sure what everybody said. I appreciate. My name's Rick Williams. I represent myself and my wife, Jill. And I would have to say we are both adamantly opposed to commercial sales of marijuana products, especially in the city of Petersburg. We have our grandchildren that we're concerned about walking up and down the streets. I really don't want them smell. I smoked pot when I was young. I caught a little bit of what a young man was saying. I had kind of the same feeling when I was young. I mean, you can have the science or whatever says it doesn't harm you, but real world observation doesn't prove that out. Anyway, I just want to say that I'm in opposition of commercial sales of Petersburg in Petersburg.
Yeah, so you'd be in favor of putting it on the ballot, Rick? That's one.
I guess, yeah, I'm not sure. I've been out of town. I've just heard it on the radio. I just wanted to come in and I'm really concerned about my grandchildren, and I don't want medical marijuana. I have no problem with. You get a prescription. I mean, that's another issue. It's not the same as recreational use. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for your testimony. Anybody else like to speak on this public hearing for the marijuana ordinance?
Yes, my name is Robert Lopez. Most of the community knows me as Doc. I've lived here for 26 years. 22 of them I was with law enforcement. And like the gentleman previously, I'm also a veteran of Vietnam. I've seen a lot of things happen over my lifetime. I've seen the influence of alcohol and drugs of assorted kinds. I've seen people at their lowest in conditions that were very compromising. That's not the issue. What I want to bring before this body is the fact that I didn't know anything about an opt-out option. I wasn't informed. I didn't know that it was a possibility. Everybody was saying, well, it's legal now, so we're going to go through this process. I felt like I had been deceived. That as a member of the public, this was unknown to me. Had this been part of the whole process in its inception, I'd have been more receptive to what might have come about. I believe it should be on the ballot, that Petersburg should decide whether they want the business here or not. If those who want it here feel threatened by this, it's unfortunate, because as the public and the right to decide to vote on these issues in our community, if you take that away from us, then you're limiting our ability to be able to govern ourselves. You work at our behest. You make the best decisions you can, and you've made very good decisions. I would like this option to be on the ballot, that we may decide whether or not we have it or not, and it will end the controversy. And if it's opposed, then it won't be in this community. And if the community votes to have it, then great. Then you can talk about how you're going to implement it. And there can be a lot of input as to what should or should not be in that process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doc.
My name is Elizabeth Pollock, and I thank you for allowing us to speak before you. I am for having the opt-out initiative on the ballot. I sent an email to the council last night, and I just want to quickly read that. Tonight, June 6, 2000. I'm sorry. Tonight, June 6, 2016, on the show 60 Minutes, Michael Botticelli, the director of our National Drug Control Policy, was interviewed and listed his serious concerns about the use of marijuana. Marijuana use is linked to poor academic performance. 1 in 9 marijuana users become addicted to the drug. Marijuana use is linked to the lowering of one's IQ. Marijuana use exacerbates mental health issues. Michael Botticelli is concerned that the legalization of marijuana will lead to a decrease in the perception of the serious health dangers linked to marijuana, and 2, lead to a dependency of states on the tax revenues derived from the sale of marijuana. Our nation has spent millions trying to get people to stop smoking tobacco because of serious health risks, and now we will allow the legal sale and use of marijuana. I wish so much that marijuana in Alaska had never been legalized in the first place. Because of the failure of voters to vote otherwise, we are now stuck. But if Petersburg still has a chance to say no by opting out of the commercial sale of marijuana, I beg the City Council to give us this opportunity for the sake of our children, parents of teenagers, school officials, medical caregivers, police officers, and so many others. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Hello, my name is Nicole McMurrin, Petersburg citizen. I think that folks are having this conversation is great. My concern is that I think I feel as if the conversation is not comprehensive enough. Perhaps we're premature in looking at putting a specific marijuana-based further discussion on a ballot or on a poll. All of the issues that I hear people bringing up as the community has these conversations are very interrelated. What's a gateway drug? What's legal? What's illegal? What actually creates costs in our community right now? It was fascinating to me when we were looking at how we might look to increase taxes in our community. We better not put alcohol on that tax increase because we love our alcohol. We like our pain relievers. We like to get altered as a human species. This is what we do. And we see negative ramifications from each of these various aspects of altered substance abuse. So now that marijuana has come to the forefront, as a state we have legalized it, it's spurring on a great conversation. But I think just to drill down on that one notion is perhaps not enough. I think we need to look and have conversations as a community. How do we want to manage these things? How do we want, Petersburg is a great place where we've got kids at every event. And we got booze at every event too. So as a child, what does that say? When I'm an adult, I get to go to an event where there's alcohol and I too can get altered. So these behaviors that we have, we need to look at very differently. So I would encourage us to perhaps push off. I understand that the Assembly is interested in next steps specifically for a ballot. Maybe it's premature. And maybe it's time to have a more robust conversation around alcohol, drugs, just the way we want our community to be, and how healthy or unhealthy are we in our daily practices. Thanks for the time in creating the environment.
Thank you, Nicole.
Hi there. Bill Tremblay, retired.
I'd like to say that, right?
It's only been a month, so it feels good just to keep saying that. I'm representing myself. When I was going back and forth to Juneau on the ferry, I had a conversation with somebody at our terminal one time. They reduced the alcohol. They got rid of the alcohol sales on the ferry, and I'd mentioned that it's too bad they did that. And the response was, well, now they're legalizing weed, then we got a bigger problem. And I looked right at him and I said, I've been traveling on the ferries for more than 35 years, and there's always been weed on the ferry. There really has been. And even after I got here in the 80s, it was probably there too. We've had this commodity in this community and other communities for years, decades, like I said, lurking in the shadows, but always available to everyone, including the kids. I think it's time that it's an opportunity, I think, that we have to begin to regulate this, regulate the sale, regulate the growing of this. I mean, we live on an island. Technically, this can't be transported in any federal way. The state prohibits it, the federal government prohibits it, so if it's legal, it's being used, all you're doing is promoting the black market use if you don't regulate this yourself. Now, knowing that it's always been here, why isn't it a bigger issue than it is? A lot of it has to do with the fact that many of us who are employed would be fired if we're found under the influence or using it. Think about the regulations that you have on your fishing boats. What happens if you get caught with illegal drugs on board? There's some big ramifications. In the federal government, if you're using firearms to go out in the field, you're randomly tested. If you get tested as positive, you're fired. I'm sure the state has its own regulations. I'm sure if you ask most businesses in town, they have their own drug and alcohol policies for their employees. A lot of it has to do with peer pressure, opportunity, and enforcement. And it's not just us having to enforce it, it's each of us having to enforce it in any ways possible. The discussions of having I would also like to allude to the fact that I did provide comments earlier to the council, and if you're going to be considering all the comments to bring those back up, I raised issues about having a place to smoke downtown. The example of what might be happening in Vancouver is my concept of what was going to be happening is basically you would have a closed-in cubicle that was ventilated for yourself to consume it, and that's it. We're not talking about throwing a big bag of Cheetos out in the middle of the floor and just people just having a great time. No. There are places where they set up for personal consumption, your consumption. Because there's so many different varieties, different people want different types of marijuana. So it's not just one plant. Kids are still getting it in this town. It's unfortunate, as much as we talk about kids having opportunities for that, I hear also about different parents, having people in there supervising their alcohol consumption with their friends in town. I mean, that's gateway stuff here that we're talking about in this town, beyond marijuana. So as far as putting this on the ballot, no. I think we're past that. I think it's probably better spent time to send it back to Planning Commission to talk about more of the details than it is to bring it up in any referendum at this time. it would be, while we talk about the amount of people the number of people and the percentage of people that voted up here, I'm noting we had like 45% or more in this town that voted during that election. I was just living in Juneau, and Juneau hopes that time that they get 20% of their electorate to show up. And they passed it too, and they're moving forward. Anything that you're keeping on tally here, it does not represent this, while it might represent people in the room, it does not represent the community, so I would not suggest using that in any statistical way to say move this forward and move this against. The people have voted. It's time to move it forward and do it productively. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else care to testify?
My name is Wes Abbott. I'm a longtime Petersburg resident. I represent myself, and I think it should be on the ballot. I'm not against anybody smoking pot if they want to, but I just don't think we need pot stores and smoke shops and stuff downtown. I think that we should have the opportunity to opt out on this, and I believe it is a gateway drug, and so I would encourage you to put it on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Anybody else care to testify under this public hearing for the marijuana ordinance? Harvey?
I'm Harvey Gilliland, and I'm representing myself. And it seems like I'm ahead of time here instead of testifying on views related to the agenda, because you have this voting issue later on in the meeting. But anyway, a lot of people talked about it, so I'll take my turn here. First of all, perhaps because I didn't pay well enough attention, I didn't know until it was recently brought up that the state ballot measure provided for local communities to have the right, and I think even the duty, to decide for themselves on how to deal with marijuana sales. And I don't think we should be denied the opportunity to decide with a vote by the people of the town. And so between now and October, if that's when the issue was on the ballot, then there'd be a lot of time for all of us to learn a lot more about the issue. I've learned a lot lately talking to people and thinking about it, going to the internet. I've been reminded that marijuana, like alcohol, can easily cause impairment to a driver of a motor vehicle that could be hazardous to themselves or other people or property. I have learned from others that does lead to stronger drugs. People use it as an antidepressant like people do with alcohol. Like my father was an alcoholic, and when things get hard, person gets down in the dumps, are more apt to go do away with their problems, get numb with liquor, and I think maybe people do that with marijuana too, and they use it as a painkiller. And there's this famous singer that I never heard of in my whole life before that died recently, and the news has it that he died of a overdose of real strong painkiller. Evidently, he was using that because what he had been taking in the past had become less and less effective. So it seems like the cycle just goes on and on. People get hooked on it, and they need something stronger all the time. So, and again, I think if you allowed it to be put on a ballot in October, we have a lot of opportunity between now and then to hear a lot more about these issues and be able to vote more intelligently than perhaps we did for that state ballot. And so
I just think there could be real danger lurking, and we need to know about it and be prepared for it. And so I think you should decide to put the issue on the ballot for the townspeople. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey, for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to testify under the public hearing on the marijuana ordinance?
Came here, I'm Susan Harai. I've lived here for 31 years. I came here for a different reason, but I happen to be here while you're discussing this. I just say put it on the ballot.
Thank you. Anyone else want to testify?
I'm Sally Reamer. I'm a retired teacher. I've lived here for 38 years. Have had children, grandchildren, and now I have great-grandchildren here. I do not feel that I'm well informed about the issue of marijuana, and when this whole thing came up, I thought, I don't know which way I would vote. And so I went to the library and started doing some research, and I have found a book for everybody. This one is called Chasing the Scream, and it really helps us to see how we have been deceived by lots of media about issues of addiction. And I haven't made up my mind yet, but I'm halfway through the book, and I've learned a lot. So I would encourage you to educate yourselves more before we have to make a decision in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Anybody else in the audience who would like to testify during this public hearing? State your name and who you represent.
My name is Nathan Lopez. I represent myself. I'm born and raised here. Absolutely love Petersburg, and just honored to grow up here. I am for putting on the ballot with the option to be able to opt out. I was brought here about 4 or 5 years ago to come. It was during a time when there was a lot of drugs and a lot of things that were going on in the community. It was in the paper. People were calling me, telling me about it. I had an opportunity to come and do a youth service up at the gym. And while I was here, I had just a lot of people talking to me about just all the effects of drugs in our community, with marijuana, with all the other drugs that happen with it. As a young person growing up in Petersburg, I just really love our community. But as a young person, I saw the effects of what marijuana had on my own family and in my own household. As a young kid, sitting in a circle with a bunch of men around me passing around a joint, and from that, watching what marijuana led to. I know there's many of us with different opinions, but I think if we can put it on a ballot and let the people of our amazing town be able to vote and decide there, I think that is a great move for us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nathan. Anybody else care to testify under the public hearing? Yeah, just come forward.
Marcia Fernandez, I represent myself. I've got here late, but I understand this is a question about whether to put it on the ballot or not, to opt out. Is that correct? I would encourage it to go on the ballot, but more than that, I would encourage everybody in the community to vote. It doesn't do any good to put things on the ballot if people don't vote. So for all of you listening out in Radio Land, let's vote. Let the will of the people be heard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. Anybody else like to testify under the public hearing? Again, Harvey?
I'm sorry, I thought of something.
Okay, if you can make it quick, that'll be fine.
I understand that now it may be legal for a person to buy medical marijuana if it's prescribed by a doctor. And if we have a vote on the issue,
I would really like to see that clarified so that people say like Mike Tolson and others who have a serious need, and it would be beneficial if a physician prescribes it, they ought to be able to buy it by some means legally to use it. So I think that ought to be on the ballot.
Okay, thank you, Harvey. Anyone else care to testify? Let's keep it to people that haven't testified before. Just very briefly, since I left Harvey testify again, but yeah.
I just wanted to point out something. We talked about medical marijuana, and there's a little bit different opinion about medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana. But the fact is, if we don't have a place you can buy legal marijuana, a retail business, you can't legally buy medical marijuana. So, we're kind of in a conundrum there. The only way you can get it legally is to buy it from a legal cultivator and from a legal retailer. So that's the only way you're going to have medical marijuana on this island, because as it stands, you cannot bring it by boat or plane legally.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Michael Mullen, and I represent myself. I would like to state that I'm for the opting out of a retail establishment of marijuana sales. For the reason that some would say if you have a facility to sell it, that it's going to remove the black market sales. And I think what's actually going to happen is it's going to increase those who would sell it now are going to go and buy it and sell it to kids, option A, or they're going to move on to something else because they're probably not going to go get a job, right? If they're selling it illegally, it's because they're not interested in doing a legal thing. So to say that it's going to do away with the black market sales is not really, I don't think, a viable choice or solution. Also, from my experience, it is a gateway drug, and for someone to say that only alcohol is a gateway drug or only this is a gateway drug is false, because I used it and I became a meth addict from my process of using drugs. And so the last time we had this discussion and I spoke, I said, what about the 1%? If the 1% is 3 of our kids in this community, do we care about 3 kids? So is it worth the risk to have a retail establishment selling pot and taking the risk that maybe 3 of our kids will become meth addicts or heroin addicts because of that retail establishment? Consider that.
All right. Thank you, Tom, for your testimony. Anybody else in the audience care to testify under the public hearing on this ordinance today? Half the people in the room did, so that's good. We got some input. With no one putting their hand up or coming forward, we'll consider the public hearing on this.
I still have things to read.
Oh, you have to read. Okay. Yeah, that's right. There's a handful of those too. And then after the clerk reads those, we'll take a short break. Thank you.
Okay. Dear Assembly members, I, Jean Ellis, am writing in support of having a vote of the people on whether or not to opt out of marijuana retail sales in our community. This is a very controversial issue. When an issue is as controversial as this one, it is always wise to put it on the ballot. We can argue all day long if the vote by Petersburg voters to legalize marijuana use in Alaska meant they wanted retail sales in Petersburg. Putting opting out of marijuana retail sales in Petersburg on the ballot will give more time for the public to make their wishes known on this controversial topic. I would also like to see the Assembly adopt a moratorium by ordinance until the issue has been adequately evaluated and voted on by Petersburg residents. I thank you for your serious consideration of marijuana retail sales in Petersburg. I especially thank Kurt Wohlhuter for bringing this forward. Jean Ellis. Dear Petersburg Borough Council, we would like to request a moratorium by ordinance for Petersburg until the issue of selling marijuana has been adequately evaluated and voted on by the Petersburg Borough residents. Thank you for your consideration, Mike and Candy Woodworth. To Petersburg Borough Assembly, I am not able to be at the meeting tonight, but would like to speak to the issue of a marijuana smoking room via this email. As this is something that will largely impact our culture and lives far into the future, I think it is of utmost importance to bring this to the people to vote on. The consequences of this decision would be a very heavy weight for you as individual Assembly members to carry as this thing unfolds into the future, long past your time on the council. Let the weight of it settle on the shoulders of the corporate citizens of Petersburg, where it belongs, by bringing it to a vote. Sincerely, Connie Bell. We have previously expressed our thoughts concerning the sale of marijuana in Petersburg. We know there has been quite a bit of planning and discussion on the subject already, but we feel it would be prudent to give more consideration to the matter and bring this issue to a public vote. Thank you for your service to our borough. Sincerely, Earl and Shannon Midkiff. Dear Borough Assembly, please give our borough the opportunity to opt out of licensing the sale of recreational marijuana. As a known gateway drug to other stronger addictive drugs, we would be supporting known and unknown negative side effects and even death in those using it, and also those whose lives would be at risk if users drive vehicles while under marijuana's influence. Licensing the sale of alcohol has not stopped the deaths and injuries of others. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers is a vibrant testimony to that fact. I do not support the sale of recreational marijuana in our borough. Sincerely, Marge Oinus. Dear Assembly, one member of the Borough Assembly asked for more input regarding the marijuana ordinance, so I am commenting. 58% of the local voters supported the change to the law. It passed statewide. It doesn't get more democratic than this. Just because one local resident claims she doesn't read newspapers, doesn't listen to the radio, and doesn't check the borough website is not grounds to negate every other vote. It is the duty of voters in a democratic society to remain informed. That's my opinion. Please share this with the Assembly members. Thanks, Leo Luzak. Dear Borough Assembly and Editor, learning facts is important. Relearning facts is also important, and sometimes exacting and painful. Take tobacco. Around 400 years ago, people colonizing in Virginia learned to smoke tobacco from local Native Americans. Recreational, yet addictive, this poison began killing Americans. Only around 50 years ago, the medical science started to prove the obvious. Millions of people go to an early grave because of smoking tobacco. I've lost family members and friends, as has every person reading these words. The good news is that we have finally relearned that smoking is bad, and less of us are smoking, and consequently dying of it. The learning curve was essentially flat. People refused to face the facts. The poisonous effects of smoking tobacco took its tragic toll. Alcohol is also a poison with a similar and even longer history of abuse to human existence. I don't need to repeat myself because these facts are also clear and acknowledged. I can list other drugs which plague our nation, our culture, and even our small town. Described as epidemic in a large scale, the death dealing of drugs becomes very personal when it takes place on local streets, which brings us to my topic. How do we keep a high tide of yet another substance, marijuana, from getting an ever stronger grip on Petersburg lives? Opening the welcome wagon to retail sales is not going to protect the public health of Petersburg citizens. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's good. If you can't believe this, read my first 2 paragraphs. Better yet, become informed about the facts of substance abuse yourself. Today's marijuana user is very likely to become a cocaine or heroin user. Neither medical science or the medical establishment of the United States condone the use of marijuana for recreation. If tobacco smoke going into human lungs is harmful, can marijuana smoke be healthy? Science does not have the evidence on this yet, only because the testing needs longer time spans, but hospital emergency rooms and morgues have been filling where marijuana has recently been legalized. Again, check these facts for yourself. If you are a Petersburg resident who serves on the Borough Assembly, it is important to deal with facts and not be swayed by bias or opinion. Sober reflection about the issue of drugs in Petersburg is before you, as you are the legal gatekeepers to guard the public health of Petersburg, us. A last fact is the important part of the law which legislators passed, that Alaskan communities can opt out of retail sales of marijuana. The medical use of marijuana remains in the law books. If this elected assembly cannot protect constituents, it would be better for constituents to protect themselves and vote out the welcome wagon being proposed for marijuana. Everywhere in Alaska, people are grappling with this problem, and it would be not just tragic, but even criminal if U.S. history continues to repeat itself and the epidemic of drug use, which began 400 years ago, stays current. Our adult kids will justifiably say, what could they have been thinking of when they look back to 2016 and the actions of an elected government which did not learn from human behavior, face the facts, and act accordingly? Then our children will continue to place the bodies of still more residents into Petersburg Cemetery. Sincerely yours, Grant H. Trask. Good day. I just finished browsing last week's paper and read with interest Robin Roberts' letter to the editor encouraging people to make their views known. I don't know Mr. or Ms. Roberts, but the people I do know have been really talking about this issue since before the first time it came up for vote and failed to pass, and all those following years until now. Those living room and small gathering conversations Roberts speaks of are what got us legal recreational marijuana today. Those conversations do reach our legislative, assembly, and committee members, or otherwise Member Wohlhuter probably wouldn't be bringing this up now. I trust those conversations to shape our future and protect our children, both locally and statewide. Count me as one of the people that actually got out and voted to make recreational use and retail sale legal anytime it was on the ballot since 1992. Most recently, I voted for it even while I was working a job where I had no expectation of personally partaking for the foreseeable future. I voted for it for reasons related to our criminal justice system and also in hopes that this would be a source of future revenue for our borough and state. I voted for it because one day I thought I would retire, and wouldn't it be nice to partake again and have it be legal? I voted for it because it would be a good investment opportunity, and the way the law is written, there is a huge opportunity for Alaskans and not big corporates to build and benefit from local businesses. After all the public process dedicated to developing a plan for Petersburg to implement or not implement it is a little disconcerting that opt-out is coming up now. Every citizen of this borough has had ample opportunity to voice opinions at those committee meetings or to those committee members or to any assembly member on how they wanted to see this happen or not happen. Let's get on with it. To revisit this just when local small businesses are starting to commit resources to getting new business off the ground does not seem right. This opt-out would further restrict people in remote areas like ours from benefiting from these new recreational and retail marijuana laws by preventing us from buying locally. You would be forcing non-gardeners like me who have no interest or talent in growing for personal use to use the black market. We just enjoyed a wonderful Little Norway celebration. I have had 4 out-of-state guests in the last 2 weeks, 3 of who were happy that they need not fear criminal repercussions for enjoying their vacation. I do not want to become a criminal to get a little bit of legal bud for my guests, just as I might stock a bottle of wine or beer for recreational use. I am open to conversation should any of you need clarification on my view. Number and email included below. I have only attended one assembly meeting due to conflicts with my working hours over the last 11 to 12 years, but regularly have listened on the radio. I appreciate each of you and your dedication to making good decisions for our community. Respectfully, long-term resident, taxpayer, and regular voter, Patrice Hiddle. Okay, and this was sent directly to Jay, but I believe it's for everyone. My response to the controversy about an in-town outlet for marijuana sales is positive. I thought Susie Burrell made several important points in her letter to the editor, and Nancy Strand hit a real note with me to get the black market out of the picture. I think that the black market is and has been for years the real problem. We humans always seem to be afraid of the new, so I expect this issue will take time and education and experience for public acceptance. Yes, a downtown outlet should be included in the plan. If there is a control problem, I think it should be handled more efficiently if it is in plain sight. On another topic, I'm very thankful for the work of the Public Works Department in cleaning up the several dump sites along Birch Street. It is truly a pleasure to walk or drive there now. I did write a thank you to Carl for their good work. Thanks for all the good work you do for our little community, Polly Lee. To the Borough Assembly, I may not be able to attend the June 6th Borough Assembly meeting in regards to the marijuana licensing and regulations. I do not want to smell a smoke room exhaust in our short 3-block downtown area. Smoke knows no boundaries. The borough is not ready for any licensing until regulations are in place. We were not informed before the state legalization vote took place that there was even an option to be a dry community. Why not? I appreciate Mr. Wohlhuter making this public knowledge. I am not a user and do not appreciate having to breathe or smell the secondhand remains from those who do use, legal or illegal. I ask the Assembly to thoughtfully consider the majority of us that do not use any drugs when you are trying to regulate the minority that do use. Sharon Sprague. Borough Assembly, thank you for your work on this issue. Although I am not a marijuana user, I support the voters of the state and of Petersburg that have already voted on this issue, and therefore I am against the opt-out proposal. Personally, I feel that marijuana would likely have about the same impacts as alcohol on the community. Thus, for the questions relating to regulations, I believe the borough should follow current alcohol regulations as closely applicably as possible. Thank you, Dan Sullivan.
That's it?
Those are the letters, yes.
Okay. Has anybody in the audience changed their mind that hasn't testified and wants to testify before we close the public hearing? Okay, come forward, state your name and who you represent, please. Oh, you've already been here. You changed your hat.
Yes.
Make it quick, please, Ross.
I just wanted to make a rebuttal on the letters regarding tobacco, because I've seen some people shaking their heads. You know, the Tlingit people of Southeast grew tobacco, and it was a hard and difficult product to grow, but it, like the natives of lower 48s, was used for sacred purposes and sacred ceremonies, and can in no way be compared to today's product. So it's just, I just wanted to mention that, you know, because that kind of hit a note with me.
Okay, thank you, Ross.
And Mr. Mayor, if
Yes.
I could, I'd just like to say real quickly that for those that say that they weren't informed that opt-out was an option, I just wanted you to know that ballot measure number 2 that was put on the state ballot flat out had that information right in it. The bill would allow a local government to prohibit the operation of marijuana-related entities. And it went on to say how the local government could do that. So I just wanted to say it wasn't something that the Borough Assembly was trying to keep from anyone, that it's been there.
No, we're not going to go back and forth, so. Thank you for, anybody that hasn't testified in the room that wants to testify this public hearing, feel free to come forward. Otherwise, the public hearing is now closed, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Wow.
We will reconvene at 1:37-ish.
You try pushing that through the...
Jay, can you hear me? Where are you?
I had 300 and some odd people.
Okay, good.
Calling Jay. This is nothing.
Oh, I did say 10 minutes. It's only been 8. Oh.
Okay. 8. Oh.
Do you need any more of
This
these?
is just not going to work. We got to come up with something, or else we're going to go.
Before Jay eats them all?
It's going to dissect some season.
Okay, we'll
Jay must
call the
be
meeting back to order. The assembly is back, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Next item on the agenda is
I'm glad
bid
it's
awards
he's not a drug.
and approval to award City Creek Trail Section 1 Materials RFQ to Impact Company Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $47,045.67. I'd entertain a motion to approve that.
So move.
I'll second.
Moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Logadakis to approve this bid award. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, bid award passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is visitors' views related to items on today's agenda. Is there any visitors in the audience that would like to speak to any items on the agenda?
Yes, thank you, and it has nothing at all to do with marijuana. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to talk about what to do with your orphan docks that are now part of our borough. I think you all know, a few of us, one of the main reasons why we did support the formation of the borough and did sign the petition was precisely because of this issue. And it's rather, I understand your situation. The state doesn't have money. They don't want to give you enough money to fix it up. You want to know how to take care of these facilities. I think it's real simple. You tell the state they can keep Entrance Island. It's a non-use facility. Let them do with it however they want. If they think they want to take $100,000 and remove it, they think they can do it, let them do it. But my understanding is if you take the $700,000, it's relatively straightforward, well, not straightforward, but you can get a grant and double that amount of money, so you have $1.4 million to use. Okay, I know that's not as much money as the engineer said when they did an evaluation of the Coopernoff and the Papke's dock. I've used Papke's since '81, so quite a few years, so I've seen it go up and down many times. I think the main deal that needs to be done out there is the floats need to be replaced. I'm not a marine engineer. I have no idea how much that would cost, but I'm sure if the situation was where you're going to tell us, no, we're just going to bail on this whole thing, we're going to let the state do it, I think that's really bad. Because I think there are solutions that we can fix these docks. I'm not as familiar with the Coopernoff dock, but I think there's solutions where if we get a pot of money, we can figure out a way to fix it. Now, I understand your biggest long-term issue is how do you deal with this? I know your harbor department's stretched. I know they don't want to be running over the Coopernoff. They don't want to be running out the Papke's. How do you maintain it? Well, for one thing, the state has hardly spent any money until last year on these facilities. I mean, maybe every 20 years they would show up and pound a few boards in the docks. So I think probably what could happen, and I think there's several of us out there, or many of us out there, that use these facilities that would entertain, like you could form a Papke's Association, a Coopernoff Association, or the city, where they would be in charge of the maintenance, the upkeep, and the enforcement of that if the borough so decided that they didn't want to take on that task. It's going to cost money. But I think if you look at it, I counted yesterday, there was 46 cars parked at Papke's. And I tell you, the majority of the people that use that facility are not the people that live year-round out in Keene Channel or Duncan Canal. For one thing, there's not very many of them. You're looking at two of them right here in the room, and there's probably maybe two more that actually live out there and use that dock. The majority of the use of that facility occurs in the summertime. From the three lodges, one of them, which is quite large, has over 30 people there at a time. All three of those lodges now pay bed tax. They all pay property tax. They all pay sales tax. So if you just automatically say, well, this is not enough money, we don't want to deal with this issue, you're looking at a big economic driver in this community. And you're also looking at a key piece of infrastructure. And it doesn't make any sense for you guys to abandon that. I think what we need to do is we need to figure out a way to work with the state, work with the users of those facilities so that we can maintain them. And I think we also need to look at maybe some different solutions for upgrading the facilities with the money we have. I understand we might not be able to dredge, put new pilings in, make the wonder facility that we would like to have. But we need to have something. And I don't know how much it would cost, but I'm confident that even if it came down to if we were just going to be able to buy the materials and build the silly things ourselves, I think there's a group of us out there that would be willing to do that. So instead of rejecting the offer from the state, I would suggest that you go to them and ask for more money, at least for the estimate of what the engineer is saying it's going to cost to fix them. And then the next step would be, which is a longer term issue, and which could actually end up costing you more money in the long term, as you're aware of, is try and figure out a way of how we would develop a user fee for that facilities, who's going to be responsible for them, and that's something that can be an ongoing discussion, and it could probably take a while to figure out. But I'm confident we can make it work. And remember, I'm not one of them, but there's a lot of people out there that were opposed to forming a borough. This is the one thing that you guys can do to show us what a borough can do. And really, it is one of your jobs, So hopefully you'll go in the right direction. And I'm willing to help in any way I can going forward if you want to work on this issue.
All right, thanks, Dave. I think you did hit the nail on the head, though. It's how you're going to pay for it and who's going to regulate it and police it and everything else. But any other visitors' views or with views related to items on today's agenda?
I'm Katie Eckley. I'm the Tobacco Prevention and Control Director here at Petersburg Indian Association, and I'd like to address a few of the changes on the Ordinance 21608 regarding the Smoke-Free Air Act of 2010. First, I'd like to thank you guys for including the electronic cigarettes better in the definition, although I have a suggestion to change it to electronic nicotine delivery systems, as it would fully cover all types of electronic devices such as e-cigarettes, e-cigars, e-pipes, hookah pens, vape pens. And then still for the smoking definition that was voted on for this ordinance includes plant products intended for inhalation in any manner, in any form. It should not, this new ordinance should not allow to have an exception to have a licensed marijuana, to be able to smoke in a licensed marijuana retail store. Smoke is smoke. Public health, along with the citizens of Alaska, have already fought long and hard to prevent indoor smoking and exposure to secondhand smoke. There's no reason to think that marijuana secondhand smoke is safer or healthier than secondhand tobacco smoke. There should not be legal discrimination between different kinds of secondhand smoke, including secondhand aerosol. Allowing for an exception of smoking rooms, whether it's permitted in a business following the conditions under Section 9.32.095 or in a licensed marijuana retail store under Section 9.32.080 violates a smoke-free workplaces. Smoke-free workplaces benefit with healthier environments for all workers, positive image in the public, and shows pride in our businesses. 93% of Alaskan adults agree that secondhand smoke is harmful to one's health, and 88% of Alaskan adults agree that people should be protected from secondhand smoke. It is well established that there is no ventilation systems in existence to remove dangerous tobacco smoke or particles in the air to make it safer to breathe. Also, marijuana is so odoriferous, cleaning the air and ventilating buildings do not eliminate or protect from secondhand smoke. Even if it's said to be safer, safer is not safe. And then I would also like to ask again for the consideration to extend the smoking distance in certain outdoor areas from 5 feet to 10 to 25 feet. The areas I would like to have considered in this section is in section 9.32.070 is B, the outdoor seating or serving areas of restaurants. C, the bleachers and grandstands to be used by spectators at sporting and other public events. And G, the outdoor playgrounds. There's no safe level of exposure to secondhand smoke, but given a larger distance would allow those who do not smoke and those who do not wish to have their health compromised to secondhand smoke, give them a better chance of breathing clean air. Most children do not understand the health risks of secondhand smoke and should be better protected. I believe clean air is free of smoke and aerosol is the standard. Everyone deserves the right to breathe clean air where we live, work, and play. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just have one. How many feet did you want to expand it to?
Anywhere from 10 to 25 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, did you have a
I had
question?
the same question.
Same question, yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other visitors with views related to today's agenda?
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Reinhardt, and I'm the mayor of the city of Kupernof. In 2010, the state offered the Kupernof dock to the city of Kupernof. We did a careful analysis of costs and responsibilities and found that there was a way that we could effectively accept that. And we did go back to the state and say we would like to accept it. Unfortunately, after that happens, then it has to go to the legislature, and the legislature turned it down, primarily because the road to Cake was still being considered, and the location of the Kupernof dock was one of the primary locations for the ferry terminal. So the legislature felt that nothing should be done until that was resolved. The dock has continued to deteriorate since that time, and previous speakers said that they haven't been maintained for a long time, and it's questionable as to how many years it's been since any money other than Kupernof money has been put into the Kupernof dock. But the city of Kupernof feels that the dock is very important, not only to the city, but also to the borough in general. The beauty of our wilderness experience was experienced by over 100 people when we celebrated our 40th anniversary of being a city, and they all came over and enjoyed our trails and the ambiance of a wilderness experience. We feel it is important to everyone to have the ability for people to continue to access that experience. So therefore, the city of Kupernof would really like to work with the borough to find a way to make this happen and make this a facility that will be accessible to all borough residents on into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Cindy?
Tom, I do have a couple questions about, just to clarify the maintenance situation. If we were to agree to accept the dock from the state now, would it need to be brought up to a level of, sort of standard maintenance before you would be able to take it over, or would you be able to move forward from here? My understanding was you had a good pot of money, but you could only spend a little bit of it each year on the maintenance.
Well, when we first studied this back in 2010, unfortunately, the offer from the state was a considerably larger amount of money than they're currently offering to the borough for all three facilities. And we found that we could refurbish that facility and actually rebuild it for less than the amount of money that they were offering, that would then allow us to put in save a pot of money for future maintenance. And then that we were planning on then feeding that pot of money, if you will, through our annual budget so that we could build a fund that would take care of the recurring and major maintenance as time went on. The city is still in a position where we would very much like to participate with the borough, receive it from the borough, but in some way help to keep that facility open and operable and safe. And we have, over the years, spent money to keep it safe, but it's harder and harder to be able to do that.
Bob, you had a question?
Couple questions. So if I'm hearing you, Tom, that you're in favor that we take it with the $700,000 and then work in partnership with Kupernoff to do something with the Kupernoff dock. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And then one of the problems I think we got is then is the future maintenance of those things. Your thinking then is that you would then would be in a position to assume the maintenance of that dock. Is that what I?
We feel that we can make money available through our budget to maintain, not replace it, not do anything like that, but to provide some money to maintain it as we go along.
Okay.
Any other questions of Mr. Reinhardt? Okay, thanks, Tom.
I have a question, but I don't know if Tom's who has the answer.
I wish I had all the answers.
If we take over the control of these docks, it's my understanding that we are then into perpetuity responsible for the maintenance, care, and keeping them open for public use. Does that disallow us from turning it over to someone else, or? If we take them over and these service areas don't get formed or these associations don't get formed, are we going to be stuck with the cost of maintenance and repair and operation because that's what the state requires?
I believe from the conversations that we had with Mike Lukestrom from the state is they wouldn't convey ownership to anybody but the borough. So if we took it, I believe we could transfer it to the city of Kupernoff, but at what level of ownership? From discussions with the harbor board and harbor master, that the current harbor budget wouldn't take care of it. So if Kupernoff could possibly take over the maintenance 100% and ownership, maybe we could do that.
If they could and would and did, and it took the responsibility away from us, that would be one thing. But if it would then revert to us because we're the original ones the state gave it to, that's my concern.
That would be a concern of mine as well. Steve, do you have some input? I see you.
Well, it's a kind of a general comment. The state will make them remain public facilities in that sense. So, in other words, the borough couldn't take Papke's and make it a private or sell it to a private entity. I mean, that has to remain a public facility. Beyond that, you have to get into the details with the state on what do they mean, the rules around a public. Our facilities are public, but we can charge a mortgage rate. So, I mean, I don't think it's not service fee related. It's more about that you couldn't privatize it and say the only people using it are these 5 people. Ongoing maintenance is a huge issue. I mean, as you've already touched upon. I mean, that would have to be pretty much fleshed out before. Because our liability gets pretty high the minute we accept a facility that's not up to speed.
I think that's where I wanted to start this discussion again about the harbors, because the offer's still there, the money's still on the table, but the state tried to get the money out of DOT. And luckily, it was already encumbered to us, otherwise it would be gone, so we wouldn't have even $700,000 offered to us right now. Kurt?
One of the questions I had was some sort of contractual agreement between the borough and these associations. Maybe the associations would need to be formed first, and then we could have some sort of contractual agreement with them to turn them over to them. I mean, it's just a thought, maybe that's the road we could go down, and then, put the onus on them for however many years we feel as though that.
I think it'd be in perpetuity, because I don't think, I would feel comfortable taking any of them over if we're, with the plans of conveying them to another entity, if they weren't going to take forever responsibility of them, because I don't see where we would, how we'd pay for it, how we would collect the fees. It's just an added burden to the borough, I think. Sure. Bob, you have
I had a question for follow up with Steve. Nancy asked a question about what would happen at some point in time if they were conveyed to us. Could we at some point in time take them out?
I believe the answer is yes, you could. I mean, but I would really want to make sure you had that clear with the state, that we weren't required to handle it forever, keep it in the current format that it's in. I mean, I think most of those type of agreements, we have to keep them a public facility as long as it exists. So if we chose to remove the facility at some point, I think the state would be okay with that. We'd want to make real sure of that, though. When the docks in town were conveyed to the city, is there a constraint? Constraint's not the right word, but essentially, do you have to keep them, are you required to keep them in a certain condition or a certain level, or they remove them or take them back?
We have a booth of a pillar sale that requires us to do that. Oh, yeah,
So it's in the
strings attached. You can't take the money and then go do something else with it
No,
and
yeah.
just wipe them out. No.
Well, let's say we take South Harbor, for example, and we don't have the money to continue to maintain it. So will the state get involved under the contract when they conveyed them to us? What would happen?
I don't know.
It seems to me like they considered them our responsibility when they were given to us.
That was my question,
Right.
yeah.
And since we're on this topic, it's basically later in the agenda, so we're talking about the harbors and these 3 docks. One discussion I just had recently with Mike Luxon from the state, they've offered us $700,000 in change. Before that, the original offer was $500 and some $1,000, but Glow convinced them that we needed a little bit more, so they kicked in a couple $100,000 more. They haven't made it official yet, but there's discussion that they're thinking about removing Entrance Island, maybe just the floating structure, leaving the pilings. Some of them are steel, some of them are wood. But if they do that, it won't be 3 or nothing, it'll be 2 or nothing potentially. But then it's also going to reduce their offer from the current $700,000 to whatever they feel it's going to cost to demo Entrance Island. So, I don't know when that time frame is. He didn't really say it, but he just, we had that discussion. I just happened to be in the office when he was talking with the harbor master one day in Glow's office, and so I had this discussion with Luxon. And I was going to bring that up later in the meeting, but we're talking about it now. So I don't know. I'm willing to, I think we need to have a concerted effort here to do what's best for keeping facilities going. Kurt?
I'll go back to my original question about the associations. What would these different people that are interested in acquiring these docks have to do to draw up a legal binding association that if we were to convey these docks to them, that would legally bind them into perpetuity? Can you guys look into that and then maybe bring that information back, or is that something that we need to look at as an assembly before I can make a good decision on that?
Point of order. We're on visitors' views right now.
Right. Oh, right. I mentioned that a minute ago. Since we were talking about the harbors that we were.
I can hold that question until later. Yeah.
We could give direction to the.
But Mr. Mayor, if I may, I can respond to Mr. Walhooter's question as it relates to the city of Kupreanof.
Sure.
Right now, the city of Kupreanof had written a letter also to the state requesting those 3 the Kupreanof dock. The borough wrote a letter to the state requesting all 3 facilities within the borough. The state, when they looked at that, they came back and said it's not appropriate to give the 1 dock to Kupreanof and the other 2 to the borough because the city of Kupreanof ordinances do not allow for ownership of harbor facilities. And the borough ordinances do not allow for ownership of harbor facilities by other than the borough within the borough. And consequently, those two issues would have to be resolved. The city of Kupreanof is in the process of updating our ordinances so that it does allow for the ownership of harbor facilities.
Okay, thank you. We could bring this, expand on this discussion later when under the proper item, but since the discussion was rolling. Anyone else in the audience with views related to items on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. That's visitors' views unrelated to any items on today's agenda. Anybody want to talk to anything not on the agenda? Okay, seeing no interest, we'll move on to board, commission, and committee reports. Consent agenda, there's one item. Entertain a motion for authorization to enter into a grant agreement with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources for reimbursable expenses not to exceed $41,390 for the Hungry Point Trail extension. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Cindy? Second. Motion's been made by Member Lakadakis, seconded by Member Gregor to authorize this agreement. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk call the roll.
Alan?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, passes unanimously. Report of other officers. The mayor's report, kind of brief, but brief if I can't get it to come up on the screen. Seeking letters of interest. The borough is seeking letters of interest from borough residents willing to serve on the following boards and commissions until the October 2016 municipal election. Hospital Board, there's one vacant seat, and Planning and Zoning Commission, there's one vacant seat. Letters of interest may be addressed to the borough clerk and emailed to dthompson@petersburgak.gov or mailed to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska. Or you could drop them off by the new office site at the PIA building on 15th North 12th Street. 2016 Mayfest celebration. Petersburg was visited by many dignitaries during our Little Norway Festival this year, including Norwegian Ambassador Os and Governor Walker. They all seemed to enjoy themselves, thanks to all who helped entertain our guests. And filing for candidacy for the October 4th, 2016 election. The first day to file for candidacy for any open board, commission, or assembly seat is the October election is July 26, 2016. The list of open seats will be provided by Clerk Thompson in the near future. Seeing as how we're kind of all scattering into the wind here in the summertime, and Member Lagadakis, I believe, is going to be gone the next two meetings, Cindy? Or is it the...
It should just be
I've got a note here.
one, I believe.
Oh, just one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Going to try and make the second one.
Debbie thought maybe gone the 20th.
Through July 9th, correct?
7th.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Oh,
two.
so it is two.
6:20 and 7:05, yeah.
Yeah, so, anyway, in the mayor and vice mayor's absence, I'd like to pick someone to run the meetings. Would you be interested, Bob? Or anybody?
I would do it, yes.
Okay, so that's taken care of. So otherwise, you'd have to decide at the meeting, so now at least you know ahead of time. So add to the discussion. Who will, do we know our schedules for the summer? I know I won't be here until, late September meetings. So if there's a good fall cold season, I might not be either. So I guess we'll just have to play it by ear. Kurt, you'll be gone most of the summer.
I'll be here for the 20th, and then that'll be the last meeting
Of June.
of June.
Okay.
Yes. One more
So you
meeting.
keeping track of this, Debbie?
Last until when, Kurt?
Till sometime at the end of September.
Thank you.
But I will call in as normal, right, if at all possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, is there any other thing I'm missing, Debbie, that you see?
Nancy, you're going to be here for the summer?
Yeah, I'd be here and available to run the meetings even.
Well,
yeah.
If that's how it wants to be, should we take a vote? Who's going to run the meetings when Cindy and Debbie and I, or Cindy and I are gone?
Mr. Mayor, point of order. I think the last time that we had this discussion, in the way of the hierarchy, I think Nancy would be the next one in line, and then I would be the next one because of our longevity on the assembly. So if there's no objection to Bob,
Okay, if we're gonna-
Nancy is legally, or,
I think
next in line.
Technically, the vice
Technically in
mayor
line.
is appointed by the mayor,
Okay.
but that's
Okay.
fine, if that's
Yeah.
the way we want to do
Yeah.
it. So, okay.
So if she wants to assume it, I'm not going to speak for her.
Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
I won't be
okay.
here. So, as long as everybody's good with it. Okay, guess that's it for the mayor's report. And Steve, you don't have anything written? Do you have anything you want to bring up?
My apologies, I was off and moving. Quick update on the building. We're actually at a stage right now where next couple of weeks we'll have some good information on the slab. That's, if you haven't seen some of the pictures, and by they're jackhammering that out in some of the areas that we were the most concerned about. Probably one of the key points in the project is making sure that when they take that slab up, that they're not surprised by what's underneath it. That would be the biggest thing that would hurt our contingency, was if they find stuff they're not expecting. They did quite a bit of exploratory work and didn't find anything that scared them, but it's not the same as pulling the whole thing up and then seeing what happens. So we're keeping a close eye on that. Marty Susort's doing a great job. I think everything is going along really well on the project, but we're going to be watching that really close as far as what happens when that slab comes up. So, unless there's questions, that's all I really had.
Any questions of the manager about goings on around town? Okay, thanks, Steve. I understand you were busy, so.
Sorry about that, yeah.
Okay, that brings us to unfinished business. This is ordinance for second reading. First ordinance for the second reading is ordinance 2016-06, an ordinance adding marijuana regulations to chapter 6.04, alcoholic beverages and marijuana. I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2016-06 in its second reading.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by member Strand, seconded by member Walhooter to adopt ordinance 2016-06 in its second reading. Discussion. Cindy.
On section 6.04.060, and I need to scroll down to that, so that section says it is unlawful for any licensee knowingly to permit any intoxicated person to enter licensed premises or to sell to any such intoxicated person any intoxicating liquors. I think that we should add marijuana to that. That only speaks to alcohol, and yet the whole ordinance is adding marijuana to that, and I believe we should add that to that section.
What section was that again?
Makes sense to do that.
6.04.060.
You're right, Cindy. I think that might be one of the only places within this whole document that it doesn't also add marijuana.
So you'd like to amend it as presented and then add marijuana?
Intoxicated appears to only refer to alcohol in the ordinance, which is really interesting, but,
Yeah, I see, like Eric said, in all the other places, it's marijuana is mentioned, so.
and then, and I guess I would also suggest that I'm not in favor of on-site use.
So then we need to make an amendment. Should we do one at a time? This will be amended to add marijuana under section 6.04060.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a second to do that?
Second.
Okay, the amendment's been made by member Lagadakis, seconded by member Lynn to add marijuana at the end of the paragraph in section 6.04.060. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, that passes unanimously. And now you would like to...
I would like to strike the provisions that refer to on-site consumption.
What section is that?
The next one down.
The very first one is 6.04.065.
65.
And there may be additional ones, too.
065? Where's the end of it then, ma'am?
So, Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment on that before we go any further here?
We need a motion in a second.
Oh, okay.
Discuss.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll I'll approve.
So I
the
make a motion that we,
And I'll second it.
Gets the right number of
Yeah.
section where she wants to change it.
Just below 060, it's the new one.
then that's, that section says the on-site use of marijuana at a local retail, at a retail location allowed. And I would like to strike that provision.
Okay, a motion's been made to strike section.
Excuse me? We're not exactly sure that, we may need to actually word it that on-site use of marijuana at a retail location is disallowed. It may still need to be in the ordinance.
Okay.
Because, of course, it's allowed for, with state statute.
I'm concerned with the intent and not the language, so that would be fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to try to...
So you could purchase it, but not
Not
consume
consume.
it on site, or smoke it on site.
Okay, and Kurt, you had a comment?
Okay, now I'm going to jump into my, the reason why I started this whole conversation about, allowing the borough residents to have another voice in how we want to locally control marijuana by putting on certain questions on the ballot so that they would have a voice in how we were going to design a meaningful marijuana ordinance. And by taking this off, we've just removed that option for them to vote on it, away from the voters. And so, I would be opposed to doing that if we could look at maybe putting this question on the ballot, which was one of the questions that I asked. And I might add, before we go any further, that the questions that I threw out there and I put on the ballot were in absolutely no shape or form comprehensive, or even, it was just a framework that we could look at. So I believe that I've heard enough from people. I believe that this is a really contentious item. I think if we add this to the ballot in October, I think we should allow the people of Petersburg to maybe use their voice at the ballot box and let us know if they would like to see it at a retail store. We can revisit this later, I know, as a borough, if we decide that it is something that we don't want after it's been tried, if the community does vote for it. But I really think that we ought to try to give the community as much voice in this decision on making this marijuana ordinance as possible. So, that's why I'll probably be voting against that strikeout.
Any other comments? Nancy?
Yeah, what does the state regulation say about that? About allowing use at a retail location?
It's a local decision. You can, the borough can choose to allow it or prohibit it. So it is a decision the assembly can make. The other issue or concern you might want to consider is that if the assembly chooses to go to an election on this, that's likely not to happen until the fall. And in the meantime, if you don't have an ordinance in place, then people will default to the state statutes. So, and that's a concern.
There could be licenses awarded or given before we come to a vote in October then?
So it may be prudent for the assembly to decide on this particular issue and the rest of this ordinance prior to going to the public, and then come back and, if you needed to, if you did that, to modify.
You had another.
I was going to say, Steve, is that completely vetted? Because when I talked to the AMCO up in Anchorage, they never indicated to me that we had to have something in place in a specific time. All we had to do was write Susie a letter, or anybody else who was going to apply for an application, that we were not ready yet to issue them that license, and that we had all the time in the world to come up with our own ordinances without being forced into using a state ordinance. That was what they had implied to me, so I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong.
We actually don't issue licenses. The state does.
Well, allow it, as an assembly. Or what we need to do, what I understand is that we need to write Susie a letter in a timely manner that says that we are going to not allow her to be able to open up her business yet. And so all she has to do is reapply again, after we have come up with an ordinance. So we just have to inform her in writing as to why we're not allowing her, to open her business and default to the state.
And the only concern about that is we have no guidance on how to write that letter until the assembly weighs in on an ordinance.
I think we need to go through the 3 readings of the ordinance to see what we hash out and how it comes out written before we can send anybody a letter, because we don't know what we intend to do. Nancy?
It's my understanding that she's not going to request the permit for use, on-site use, but only a dispensary to sell. And when and if she does request a permit for on-site use, there's going to have to be several remodeling modifications made. And she realizes that, and I'm not assigned to speak for her, but is my understanding that she has no plans for, at this time, for on-site use. And my question about the state is, does the state in the state law allow an on-site smoking at a dispensary with the proper permitting?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy?
So a couple things, if I can keep my thoughts straight. One is that I think it's beneficial to have the ordinance itself say what we want it to say. In my mind, the concerns that people have with opt-out are really a planning and zoning discussion, in which case we still would want this. And we haven't talked about, if we did put opt-out on the ballot, would we be talking about only Service Area 1? Or would we be talking borough-wide? And we haven't had that discussion yet.
Debbie, you got some clarification on that, didn't you, or Mindy?
Our attorney says that we have the right, power, whatever word is correct, to make the ordinance borough-wide.
I understand that. I don't know from the public what their wish would be.
Right.
So then there might be a place in the ordinance where we need to modify it to say on-site use of marijuana at a retail location not allowed in Service Area 1, if that's how we want it to be phrased. We do have one more reading, and there's one more public, not public testimony, but there's views related to the agenda items.
At the very beginning of this ordinance, it restricts it to Service Area 1.
It does.
Okay, all right.
But that could be changed.
The use, whatever's in this ordinance, is just controlling of Service Area 1. Okay, so the other amendment, Bob?
Nancy.
I don't think we should be, I can't support changing this. If we're going to be following the state, isn't that what we had decided? We were going to follow the state regs? It seems like we should continue to follow state regs on this issue as well.
Right, it's up for each municipality, I believe, to modify it how they would wish.
Right.
But yeah, without.
But I thought we had, there was a time when we were going to just follow the state requirements without adding any requirements of our own.
There's been many changes through the process of this, and just like happened in Ketchikan, it got voted down, and a member that voted in favor of voting it down changed their mind and brought it back up.
Well, I still don't think
Anyway,
that.
I'm just saying how that happened in that particular municipality. Fairbanks is struggling with their situation now, too. So, Jay, you had a comment?
Yeah, I got a couple, but I'll just stick with one on the amendment right now.
That's what we're discussing. Thank you.
Yep, Roger. On January 4th of 2016 this year, we talked about, that's when we voted as an assembly to make things less restrictive. The state asked us to be 500 feet from schools, churches, et cetera. And the assembly voted unanimously 7-0 to ask the state to move it to 250 to be less restrictive, with the purpose to increase more downtown business, as ironic as that seems now given our meeting. That was this whole assembly 7-0 voting to try to be less restrictive, because right now we have a little monopoly carved out down there. Tying into state regulations, they're really restrictive. This ordinance before us is extraordinarily restrictive. The state didn't create these as so that anybody says, I want to sell pot, let's just do it, or I want to grow pot, now I can, or I want to open a smoke room, now I can. There's legitimate hoops to go through to make that happen. Is a smoke room something that I would be attending? No, but I don't feel it's our role right now to be legislating that any retailer in town, and that if we're willing to go through, if they're willing to invest that much in their business, I don't see why we'd want to prohibit them from doing that, so I won't be supporting this amendment.
Cindy?
Yeah, I would like to respond to that, and I think my issue is that I don't believe they've established a legal limit for having ingested marijuana or marijuana products. By not allowing it downtown, you avoid having to enforce anything about how much someone has consumed.
For, am I clarifying? For, you're talking about on-site consumption
On-site
specifically?
consumption.
Okay.
And that's my rationale.
Understood.
Isn't there a regulation on how much you can sell at one point?
One person, 1 ounce per day.
Yes.
In a smoking establishment?
Or any retail facility.
But consumption, is there a limit?
There is not.
Oh.
OWI laws are catching up in Colorado, but they're not there yet.
And to further complicate things, the ordinance allows barter and other ways of conveying it to people.
So, any other, Kurt?
I'm going to go back to my original argument here, is that we're usurping the vote of the people. You know, we had several people out in the audience that said that they would, like to have an option to be able to vote on whether or not they could have a smoke-in or not. There's some people that would choose to have that. And so right now, we've just taken that vote away from those people by determining that we are going to not allow it.
And we're going to discuss that later in the meeting when we decide whether, as an assembly, we want to put it on the ballot or not.
Okay. So, I mean, so if we approve this, and if we amend it as Member Lakadakis has just said, then do we go back then and rescind that, or how would we handle that at that point?
I would imagine a motion could be made at the third reading to change it back.
Okay. But then I won't hinder the process.
I don't see any reason why you can't.
Okay. We'll move
Or we
forward
could
then.
vote it down now.
Yeah.
Correct.
Either way, yeah. Okay.
We can always change it next time.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
That's why, there's three
Okay.
readings of all these.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion on this amendment? And the amendment would change section 6.04.065, on-site use of marijuana at a retail location not allowed. And this pertains only to Service Area 1, as I was reminded that that's what this ordinance is pertaining to, correct? Okay, so this is on the amendment.
Okay, just the amendment, got it.
Call a roll, please.
Nancy?
No.
Kurt?
All due respect, no.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Nope.
Bob?
No.
Okay, the amendment to change section 6.04065 to add not allowed of the retail location fails 5-2 with members Lagadakis and Castro voting to in favor of the amendment. Now that brings us back to the ordinance as amended. Is there any more discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I won't be the broken record, talk about the work that went into this ordinance taken from the state, modeling after alcohol laws, because I think it's very thorough. I just want to really reiterate, the people of Petersburg voted already to allow this on a commercial level. Very clearly, very loudly, the will of the people has spoken clearly. In a general election, 58-42 is generally called a landslide victory. We can quibble about the numbers and the turnout, but those are just details. It was a very large victory, giving us a mandate to carry out the will of the people at this point. And I think this ordinance is a very accurate and thoughtful, and I'd say restrictive, reflection of the will of the people, and a really sound marijuana ordinance. I'll definitely be voting for it.
Any other discussion on the ordinance as amended? We had the one amendment to add marijuana to the level of intoxication in the facility, so that passed. So that is in this vote, as you know, the ordinance is amended in that fashion. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Wait, one more.
Oh,
one more.
Or Eric, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, just as Leo Luzak noted, that he feels that it would be or I feel that we'd be doing a disservice to all the voters who actually read the initiative and voted on it. It was explicitly stated within the ordinance that this was going to be, the community sales would be legalized, and that we would have it locally available as well. I feel that we would be disrespecting the efforts of the 58% who did vote for it initially, and I will be voting for this ordinance.
Any other comments? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2016-06 passes unanimously. That brings us to new business, and first item under new business is ordinance 2016-08. That's an ordinance amending Chapter 9.32 of the Borough Code, the Smoke-Free Air Act of 2010, and amending Chapter 9.12 of the Borough Code, littering, by amending the definition of litter. I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2016-08 in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Member Greger, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt ordinance 2016-08 in its first reading. Is there discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make the suggestion, or make the change that Katie Yeckley suggested as far as changing the wording to say electronic nicotine delivery systems so that we're comprehensive.
Whereabouts she at?
She referred to a section and I didn't catch it.
I didn't either, but we're...
Did.
Did you pick up on that, Debbie?
I was looking for it. I asked her to email her thing to me, and I don't have it in front of me, but...
I didn't write it.
Oh, here we go. It's under the definitions, so...
So you're proposing an amendment to add, and what section is that?
What it currently says is smoking means inhaling, exhaling, burning, or carrying any lighted or heated cigar, cigarette, or pipe, or any other lighted or heated tobacco or plant product intended for inhalation in any manner or form, or utilizing any form of electronic nicotine delivery system or other vapor-producing device.
So that is way down in section...
It must be.
9.32.010. It's like the...
Okay.
It's just
Yeah.
10th paragraph
Near
or
the end,
something along
yes.
that. yeah.
Page 31.
Some-
Listed alphabetically.
It's on page 4 of the
There you go.
document. It's already pretty all-encompassing without
So she
having...
made is there a second to her amendment before we have discussion, I guess?
A second?
Okay. Motion's been made by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Walhooter to add to the definition of smoking. And what did she say? Whatever the...
So instead of electronic cigarette, it would say electronic nicotine delivery systems.
Okay. Okay, Eric? Sorry.
I don't know what an electronic nicotine delivery system is. I know what an e-cig is, so it makes it a little bit more vague. I feel that utilizing any form of electronic cigarette or vapor-producing device is exactly that, and it uses the e-cig terminology that is common to us. But I mean, if we feel compelled to make that change and make it a little bit more exact, then I guess I'd be for that.
Any other discussion, Nancy?
I couldn't hear most of what Katie was saying, but I agree with Eric, and plus vapor-producing device, vapes, that's, makes it clear to me that, I mean, it's apparently also an electronic nicotine delivery device.
So one more time, state the change. It's going to...
Instead of saying, or utilizing any form of electronic cigarette or other vapor-producing device, it would say, or utilizing any form of electronic nicotine delivery system or other vapor-producing device.
So that just takes cigarette out and puts nicotine delivery system in.
Okay.
So,
Semantics.
got it. Any other comments on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, it's been, that section of the ordinance has been amended. Now we'll go back to the main ordinance. Is there any discussion on the main ordinance? Any more amendments to it? Will the clerk call the roll?
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, the first reading of ordinance 2016-08 passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is resolution 2016-13. This is a resolution to temporarily change assembly meeting times for the 2016 summer months of June, July, August, and September to 12 noon. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved.
For second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Waldhuter to adopt this resolution. Any discussion? Well, I'll say my 2 cents, like I always do on the noon meetings. I'm not in favor of the noon meetings. I think it doesn't allow people that work. I talked to a couple people in different businesses today that said they can't even listen to the meetings when they're at work, so that disenfranchises them. I know it makes it more convenient for, administration and for certain people on the assembly, but, so I will be voting no, and it's not because I'm being mean, it's just how I feel. Any other discussion?
I have similar concerns.
That is something, yeah, when you get like the agenda a little bit later in the week, and then then you're busy that week and you don't have an opportunity to, as we have oftentimes procrastinate until the final day. But, having the evening meetings does make things a little bit easier to be able to reach out to constituents and other admin folks. But I'm for a noontime also as well.
Nancy?
I'm in favor of the noon meeting, and I've had many people approach me and say they like it at noon because they can at least listen to it on the radio.
Okay. Kurt?
One of the advantages of these summertime meetings is that they go awfully quick because there's usually not a lot of things on the agenda, so, well, no, not this one, this is totally different. I'm talking about
whose fault is that?
Yeah, wait till I get started. Anyway, so I can't imagine they would last much more than an hour, so.
Yeah, and, it does, technically I won't be here, so, I mean, it's just voicing my views have been conveyed to me by other people. So, any other discussion? Here I am making the meeting go longer. All right, this is the vote on resolution 2016-13. Will the clerk call the roll?
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
No.
Mark?
No. So resolution 2016-13 passes with 2 dissensions, and that is Member Lagadakis and myself. The next item on the agenda is, I'll just mention this before I even introduce it, is my brother is part of this, owns this land. I don't think it makes any difference. If I should recuse myself, I will, but, I mean, I'm not going to get any monetary benefits from it. It's pretty, just like it says, it's a authorization for Mayor Jensen to accept for public uses and for public purposes the real property dedicated to the public by this plat for the Ramstead Homestead subdivision, including easements, right-of-ways, alleys, and roadways. So I'll entertain a motion to authorize this.
So move.
Second.
Okay. This motion's been made by Member Lynn and seconded by Member Greger to authorize this. And it's some land over at Papke's, and or not Papke's, over at Point Agassiz. Papke's just popped in my mind for some reason, probably the harbor thing. But the borough would get no responsibilities for maintenance or anything. Bob?
Yeah, that was going to be, my understanding was is the borough has no responsibility other in maintenance or anything else in this.
Yeah, in fact, under the action, a note here, it says, this land dedication is in the Point Agassiz area, which is currently exempt from the local plating authority. Acceptance of lands for public use or public purpose does not obligate the public or any government body to construct, operate, or maintain improvements. And I need authority to sign it, so is there any other discussion?
This means your brother wants to give the borough a gift of land for public use?
Well, I think to properly have the land platted, you have to have right-of-ways to access all the property, and they need our blessing for some reason. Steve, can you explain it? You talked to John about it, and was...
Do you want to try? The young lady over here might be...
Oh, there we go. Liz. Can you... Yeah. You've been sitting a long time. You probably need to stretch your legs anyway.
Liz Cabrera, Community Development. The state recently changed their policy. They were told by their attorney that anytime they do approve a plat within a municipal borders, even if the municipality does not have platting authority in that area, that they have to dedicate the public right-of-ways and public streets. The municipality has to accept those on behalf of the public. So all it does is provide legal access to all the property owners of that from that subdivision. So from navigable or a public right-of-way into their own private property, just like any subdivision that we would do in Service Area 1. The difference being that they're not required to develop those or provide any improvements.
Okay, thank you. Anybody need any more clarification or have any questions?
And you're comfortable that they do provide on this subdivision access to all the lots reasonably?
We have no say. That was for the state to determine because we don't have platting authority in Point Agassiz. So according to the state, they do.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and I think this is one of the last steps they need before they can start putting the property on the market, so. Any other questions or discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes. Okay, so Debbie, will you draft something up and I'll sign it, or is there, I'd sign the plat.
Yes.
So that they, are they
And I
there?
have it.
I'll do that before I leave.
Okay.
Okay, next item on the agenda. Proposed questions regarding marijuana for the October 2016 ballot. This is an action item, so we'll need a motion to approve these questions being put on the ballot.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second for the sake of discussion.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Greger to accept these proposed questions regarding marijuana for the October 2016 ballot. And so, discussion.
Hey, I'll start off here. I've had plenty of time to read what the state had come up with in adopted regulations on what the local options are. And I understand fully what the general election numbers were. That was general election, state of Alaska. Now, the state, in their infinite wisdom, also gave the locals options in which to consider on how we wanted to draft a meaningful marijuana law. So reading from the regulations adopted by the state under the Alaska Administrative Code 306.200, local options. If a majority of the persons voting on the question vote to approve the options, or if a local government's assembly or city council passes an ordinance to the same effect, the local government shall adopt a local option to prohibit the sale or importation for sale of marijuana and any marijuana products. 2, the operation of any marijuana establishments, including one or more of the following license types: a retail marijuana store, a marijuana cultivation facilities, a marijuana production, manufacturing facilities, or a marijuana testing facilities. Now, my point is, the state in their infinite wisdom realized that they were not going to be able to design a marijuana ordinance that was going to fit every community. So what they did was they gave every community the option to either take it upon the responsibility of the 7 of us, which basically tells the public that we don't trust their input in what's going to happen, so they proxy their votes to us, or we believe enough in the public to give them enough information that could then redirect us on how to define how we want to come up with a meaningful marijuana law by putting some things on the ballot so that they would have a voice in carrying this on, which gives everybody now ownership in how marijuana then will be distributed amongst Petersburg. I think it would be a huge injustice to take that vote away from the people. I think the people deserve the right to direct us how we should design a marijuana law, and that is why I'm standing on this local option, and I will be voting for this. Now, my questions. I sent everybody a little statement that simply said that they are by in no means comprehensive. They're open for criticism, comments, changes, whatever. But I think we do need to have that discussion, because it's obvious that, I wasn't keeping tally, but it seemed like, as you always will in hearings, you'll have, a majority of zealots comes out, to vote one way or the other on these issues. But I think if even two people, had an opinion on something, I don't think we should take that vote away from them. I think everybody has a right to re-vote on this. And that's why the state wrote this ordinance, or, this regulation, and put it in place so that we could then lean on the state to say, we would like to give the locals the option to help us construct a meaningful marijuana ordinance. And so that's why I brought it up, regardless of my personal feelings.
Okay, thank you, Kurt. Any other discussion on that? Nancy?
I can't support that. I feel like if the state had infinite wisdom to begin with, we wouldn't be on the brink of bankruptcy at this time. So it's just an aside. I can't support the is it an ordinance or
regulation? It's a regulation.
It's just
it's a local option regulation.
Yeah.
So what we're voting on here is the option of putting these questions on the ballot until they're vetted by the attorney.
Right, I can't.
And we decide what they're going to be, which I wish would have taken place through the committee process, which it didn't. And it sounds like I'm talking about Ketchikan again, because I just talked to a council member down there. They didn't have much input from their committee they formed like we did, But I think the public has had time since this was passed by the state to be involved at the local level. Now we're down the road and, I don't know if the state's close to issuing permits or not, but now to stop that process by, if we put this on the ballot, in my mind, this ordinance that we just voted on today in the second reading is basically dead until we have a vote.
Can I rebut to that? That's not putting the entire onus of the marijuana ordinance on 7 of us. We have just usurped the voters' right to include their voice in a October ballot, which the state gives us clear right, clear directive, that if we allow it as an assembly, we can ask them for their input. I've lived in this town for 37 years, seeing how everybody's throwing around numbers how long they've been here. What's another 3.7 months to figure out what the people want? By vetting intelligent questions that we can get information from them as to how they would like to see this come down, because they are the ones that are going to have to live with it. And that's why I'm arguing for those people. I clearly understand where the general election came down. That's not the same as a local election.
Any other discussion? Bob?
Are you proposing to put it on as an advisory questions or as a rule, so to speak? This is the way it'll be opt out, this is the way, opting out. If they say no, then no other questions are moot.
My intention is to get more information from the public as to how they feel. So if it would settle better with the assembly that it is a advisory questions, I think then we could then move forward with the will of the people. Right now, we're just assuming what the will is, because the state and the city, came in with, in a general, election to, 58%, 42%. I heard there's a landslide. But I talked to so many people, and I'm not going to throw any numbers out there, that have said that they voted to decriminalize it because they didn't think it should be going to the court system for somebody to buy a bag of weed from somebody and then get caught. So, and so they will change their mind on how they feel marijuana should be, available in Petersburg. And I think if we 7 think that we're smart enough, I'm flattered that the people trust us to make this decision for us. But I can tell you right now, I do not have the wisdom of what the people want, because there's too many people that are telling me differently. So I think it would be a huge disservice. I think we would be usurping the people's voice, one vote, to come up with some intelligent, questions that could help us, advise us at this point on which direction we should go. And I think we owe that to the public.
Nancy?
I think they had plenty of opportunity during our committee work to ask questions and make suggestions and offer their opinions. It smacks of apathy not to have done so then. I don't think we should be held responsible for their apathy.
Anyone, Jay, or anyone have a comment, or Eric, or?
I do.
Kurt?
I'm just sitting back.
Okay, well, wait, go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to say, I talked to several members that were on that board, and I would like to get a, I mean, if we're talking statistics, I would like to get a clear view on the people that volunteered to be on that committee, on what their opinion was on the use of marijuana in Petersburg. The few members that I did talk to said that it was overwhelmingly people that were interested in having marijuana sales in Petersburg. So I don't see how that is a balanced or fair way of assessing what the people want. I mean, when I was on the harbor board as the chairman of the harbor board, I did not want a harbor board that agreed with everything I said, because I don't have all the answers. I want people that come at it from different angles. I want to get more information, and I really think that if we don't allow the public to vote on this, we have lost their trust.
Nancy?
Every person who volunteered to be on those committees was appointed, and that was the time to get on it. I don't think that there were restrictions made by anybody about the number of people that, and the opinions of the people who served on those committees.
If I see a pretty even split, and it's hard to say just from a meeting like today, when you take the tally, there was more people that showed up to this particular meeting that wanted to put it on the ballot than there was that didn't. But then again, I guess you don't know what the number is, but it's been voted on before, that people have had an opportunity to participate in the formation of this, and they still can. In the third reading of the ordinance, they could try to get it amended to, like, not have a smoking shop downtown. I don't know how that would go, but. Jay?
Thanks. Glad I seconded it for the sake of discussion, because we should have the discussion. That being said, obviously I disagree, and I will not be voting to put this on the ballot. Similar to Kurt, but I see it a little differently, that if we put it on there, I think it's a huge usurping of the people. We've had a year and a half worth of discussions on this topic, asking for feedback, because I think Kurt is spot on. None of us are smart enough to figure this out on our own. Completely agree. We've been soliciting feedback from everyone and their brother, pleading with it throughout this time. It was a discussion item on the Assembly meeting schedule for a long time. If we put this on the ballot right now, my take is we're telling the voters who voted for this in fall of 14, you're not smart enough to make your own decisions. All the people have given us feedback to this point now. You're not smart enough. In fact, you're too dumb. This isn't going to work. That's a ridiculous premise to operate from. I think the electorate is extraordinarily intelligent and have been extraordinarily thoughtful and have given us an extraordinary amount of feedback about how to do this right. And again, I think that's how we came up with the ordinance. I don't want to take that power from them a year and a half into it. I think they've been really involved and really engaged, and I've been appreciative of it. And I, of course, want more as we move forward, but put this on there now, it seems send a very bad message to the voters of Petersburg.
Bob?
Yeah, listening to everybody that had testimony, and I was keeping track here, and it is about 50-50, but I heard quite a number of different things there. Some people obviously didn't want it at all in Petersburg. Somebody wanted it outside of town. Other folks, there was, we're talking, well, marijuana is really bad, and it does all these nasty things, and other folks are saying it's good. I think we've come to the point that we've laid it out on the table. We know what it, we've heard folks. It's time to make a decision, in my opinion, and move on.
Kurt, you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's totally unclear in my mind where they want to go. Absolutely unclear. When you have 50% of the people saying they want it, 50% of the people they don't want it, that is not a clear directive in my mind. What we're doing is we're telling them that they are not intelligent enough now to continue to advise us where we need to go on this issue. And I really think that, this is a little fish for, as far as I'm concerned, to fry. We've got fiscal issues coming up 4 or 5 years from now. And if we're not willing to listen to people, on how they want this community to look like and how we're going to be on our own, and and like I say, I'd be willing to accept it however it comes down, but I think there was enough people that, let's go back to I don't mean to rabbit trail, let's go back to the Borough website when they had questions on the ballot. Tell us your opinion on what you want to see with marijuana. Was the option of opt-out ever on that questionnaire? No. It had everything to do with what is marijuana going to look like in Petersburg, not whether they want it or not. So that was really an unfair survey that we had out on the market for over a year. I just don't see how we can run with that. I cannot consciously run with that. I am not going to, I'm going to stand my ground here. I mean, I really think that every option that the state has allowed us to consider needs to be put before the voters here in October. I mean, that's just my personal opinion, and I'm going to stick with it.
Thank you, Kurt. Cindy?
I'm trying to listen and not weigh in, but here's something to consider, Kurt. We had several people stand up and say, I didn't pay attention to this issue, I didn't read the paper, I didn't know about this. And honestly, I don't know if those people voted in the election. However, I do know what the voters said as a result of the election, and that's what I'm going to use in making my decision on this.
I agree.
Nancy?
I agree. 58% isn't 50-50, 42 isn't 50-50.
This is one of the times, that's not public comment time, Harvey, sorry. This is one of those times that, sitting in this position, no matter what you do, well, 42% of the people are going to not wave at you for a month or two. And I hope that doesn't happen, because I still like everybody in town just as much as I did before we started this discussion. But that's just part of our job. And I feel that it's up to us to vote whether it should be on the ballot or not, and we'll go from there, see what happens. And it's time to make that decision, I believe. That's why we put it on the agenda as an action item. Should we take a break before we vote? I'm just kidding. Okay, so is there any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
So the question is that what you're voting on is to accept the ballot, the questions for the ballot, okay?
Some form of questions.
Yes. Jay?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
No.
Eric?
No.
Mark?
No.
Bob?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Okay, it fails 6-1 with Member Walhooter voting in favor to put the proposed questions regarding marijuana on the ballot. There's no personal actions here and that. So then the next type thing on the agenda is communications. So does anybody have any communications? I've got a couple letters here I'll read, and it's in pertaining to the Mayfest celebration. And there was my mayor's report said there was a lot of dignitaries in town, and a lot of people helped entertain them. And this is a letter from Governor Walker. I'm glad he made up his mind to come 6 hours before we had the barbecue, but we pulled it off thanks to a lot of people in town. It was great. But thanks very much for all your generous hospitality while I was in Petersburg. The barbecue was spectacular. This trip gave me an excellent opportunity to spend time with the Norway Ambassador Corey Oos to discuss the impact of low oil prices on their economy and ways that they are dealing with it. Also, thanks very much for setting up the Saturday AM coffee with some of the local fishermen and other people that were at Glacier Express, and then the governor just walked down the float and was visiting with everybody that he ran across, and it was pretty nice to see. Then from Ambassador Oos, I had a fantastic time visiting Petersburg last week in conjunction with the Little Norway Festival. You and the people of Petersburg were wonderful hosts, and I cannot thank you enough for your hospitality. Everyone I met with were very friendly, welcoming, and play a key role in strengthening the Norwegian-American relationship. The days I spent in Petersburg have been some of the greatest days I have had during my tenure as an ambassador in the United States. So that's a pretty big statement. Looking forward to staying in touch, and please let me know if you should come to Washington, D.C. So that was it. They both had a good time. I think Ambassador Rouse made a comment that he's never seen a party held in Norway that would compare to the one that we put on here at Mayfest, so I think they'll be back.
He said he wants to.
Yeah, so I'm glad he got to mingle around for a few days, so.
I heard they have a one-day party in Norway, and we have a 4.
Yeah, so there we go, we'll get him back. Maybe he mentioned something about the Crown Prince, maybe, so we'll see who comes next year. So if there's no other communications, we'll move to assembly discussion items. Recognitions, is there any recognitions?
I think we didn't catch them the last time, but I believe that Rin Schneider housed some folks that came from the legislature, and Sally Reamer and her husband on the fly agreed to host Senator Donnie Olson and his children, and I wanted to make sure that we gave them public thanks for doing that.
And Glow housed the governor for a night.
Yeah.
Because there's no hotel room, so he was.
And he also said at the barbecue that evening, he said, each time I come, I stay a little bit longer. So that's a good thing.
He wants to stay longer each time he returns, so that's good. We're opening up the door for him. So any other recognitions? Okay, now, discussion items. Back to Papke's Landing, Kupernoff, and Entrance Island State Docks. Anybody have any input? Since we talked about it a lot earlier, I know it was a lot of contact.
Get Nancy first there.
Nancy.
Once again, I think we shouldn't even, conversing amongst ourselves is okay, but I don't think we should be sending anything to the state until these areas are in service areas. And whose ever suggestion about forming associations? What better way to form an association than make it a service area?
Any other discussion on Three Harbors?
I guess I see the issue a little bit different. There's a bigger issue here, I believe, that we need to look at. This group just made a decision a while back to select lands here in the borough, which included 2 drive-down, Woodpecker Cove, and then you got, there's nothing there at Olson's, but you do have a facility, and you have some more recreation areas outside of town that you didn't have before. When we chose to have a borough, that adds a different responsibility. To me, everybody talks about, the issue comes down, as Mark said, is how do we pay for this? Whether you form a service area or whether you don't, you still got a responsibility to take care of some of these facilities. Papke's and Kupernoff are part of them. I think the discussion needs to come back is how we're going to pay for this. I'm not in Nancy's camp and that we should form a service area and that those people out there ought to pay, for instance, for Papke's. Those lodges, I believe the same thing that was said here earlier, that they pay taxes too now. And I think we need to find ways to pay for it. Talking with some other folks, I think there needs to be multiple ways to pay for it. You're not going to do it out of one pan. I think there needs to be a permit, a launch permit that goes area-wide. I think whether you're launching here or out at Woodpecker or anyplace else, I think there actually needs to be a tax on all recreation boats is another way to gain fees here, if we could do it. And obviously, there's other ways I haven't thought of. I know Glow doesn't want any part of these because it, should have to add people. And she's saying no, no, no. But then there's other ways to do business. Take Papke's, for instance. I look at that facility. We just bought 3 lots there. The DNR has the ramp. DNR has the parking lot on the other side. Here's an excellent opportunity for a private business, as I see it. If we were to take those other lots, or the areas that DNR now has as part of the borough, we develop a site plan and we go out and solicit for a private person to both develop it, manage it, and to be able to sell. I have no problem with a store there. Somebody that sells propane or has, but there's an excellent opportunity here for a business. Take Scal Bay. We have a site there, beautiful site. There's another part, we have a ramp. We have a responsibility to do something with that. Here's another opportunity in my mind to develop an entire site plan and to look at it differently than we have in the past. We could actually make a beautiful site there that would bring more business to Petersburg to maintain boats and do other things. But you need to have a way to do all types of maintenance there. And we could do it if we're willing to do it. And I think both of those, and that's, obviously there's other ways to gain money as we think about that, but I think that we got to change a little bit the way we've thought about this in the past. I don't want to add any more employees and that type of thing, and I really don't want to put any more burden here. But I think that the issue is bigger than both those docks. The other thing I would say is that I really do believe that, we heard Tom Reinhardt today talk about them wanting to be part of it, and I would agree that Kupernoff needs to, if they want part of that, they need to be at the table, whenever we make that decision. The only other thing I would say is that you look at, was said earlier about, I'll use Pappy's as an example, and I'm sure Kupernoff's the same way. For heaven's sakes, most of that facility is okay. Why can we not just take the money and build a float, an 80-foot float like it talked about in the plan, down south, bring it up and put it into place, take the other one out and put it into place and quit fussing. I mean, it lasts for another 10 years, 15 years. We don't need to have the Taj Mahal, so to speak, when we look at this as grandiose. It needs to be simple. And for me, for right now, I just think we need to continue the dialogue of different ways to pay for this or different ways of doing business.
Yeah, my question would be, I know the engineers come in and they always have these really huge inflated numbers, because they get paid for, the bigger the number, the more money they get paid. So I'm sure if Harold Medallion was sitting here right now, we'd have a few log floats, with a couple of planks on it, and I'm sure everybody would be happy, at Papke's, and you know what I mean. So it seems to me like this is a foregone conclusion. Now, how do we get out of it as a harbor user in the community of Petersburg, in a sense, using the South, Middle, and North Harbor, from subsidizing these other harbors out, outside that I'll probably never use because of the size of my boat? I think that's the biggest question we have here. So what's the timeline on when this money needs to be spent or accepted?
One conversation that took place like 3 months ago was potentially a year, but now the last discussion was that their state is toying with the idea of removing Entrance Island on their own, which will reduce the amount they offer us, which, in my mind makes sense. They have to get money from somewhere to demo it. And like I was also told in another conversation, that the legislature tried to get their hands on that money. The administration did, for spending it on, the fiscal crisis, but it was already encumbered to us. So, I don't know when they're going to come knocking on our door and say, make up your mind. So that's why it's, I don't know, maybe we could, Kupernoff has expressed interest again in the Kupernoff facility, and I'm sure that there's numerous people in the Papke's area that want that dock too. And first, maybe we need to decide if we just get the two facilities, if we can convey Kupernoff dock to the city of Kupernoff, and will they accept it in the condition it's in? Or if we have $700,000, that'd be $500,000, I guess, would be the offer. If we get a matching grant, is it 50-50, Glo, those grants? So if we get $1 million, we're still how much shy for just redoing the engineer's estimate repairs at Papke's? So we need to have the discussion, in my mind, as the assembly and City of Kupernoff and users at Papke's maybe, but how do you get there? Cindy?
Aside from the economic discussion, I would be in favor of taking the two facilities. I see less of a benefit and more of a liability for Entrance Island. I agree with Dave Kensinger and Tom Reinhardt that we need to prove up a little bit as far as the outside service Area 1 folks, and as far as subsidizing things that you won't use. It goes all the way around. I mean, there are seniors who are paying for schools. Everybody's paying for a little bit of something that they aren't necessarily using. So that argument doesn't necessarily fly with me. One of the things that I see is more and more people moving out the road, and being able to have a facility that you can use at Papke's takes the pressure off of North Harbor and South Harbor facilities. And I don't think that, and Glo looks like she's challenging me, so you need to come to the mic if you're going to respond. But there's a lot of use going on there now, and as Dave said, it's recreational use, it's lodge use, it's visitors coming through, it's all kinds of things, and that use I don't think is going to go away. So I would want it to happen in a safe manner, and trying to use that ramp right now, having almost taken out my husband driving the boat up on the thing the other day, I would like to see that be in a better condition. And I actually responded to the questions, and you have received them all in your mail. I'm not going to read them out loud. Are they going to get posted on the website, the responses?
They can.
Okay.
But I did want to clarify that the ramp isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about the float
the
only.
float and all of that,
Yes.
but it all is challenging. But in any case, I responded to the questions and just for starting some discussion with a lot more thoughts about concessions and other things that we could do with borough land in those areas, and as well as allowing Kupreanof to manage their dock.
Bob?
Yeah, just a question. You talked about matching grants. Are we talking about a Tier 1 grant? Is that what's your thought process?
Maybe Glo can explain it. I think it's the Tier 2 grant or mid.
Well, there's two possibilities. DOT puts out a 50-50 municipal harbor match grant, of which there's two levels. There's the Tier 2 and the Tier 1. The Tier 2 is what you do for maintenance.
Right.
You patch up 50%, you apply for, and you can do maintenance. Tier 1 is when you want to do a full replacement. We're always on the docket, like we've gone through the full replacement for the North Harbor. So we've used that, we can never use that again. Middle Harbor and South Harbor have only gone through Tier 2. We have not gone through Tier 1 yet. So we can eventually, in 30, 40 years, when it comes to replace those two facilities, we're still eligible for Tier 1 up to $5 million as of today to replace those harbors. They'll always be on the docket for Tier 2. So that being said, it's just it gives you an outlet to do minor maintenance, 50,000 and up for the Tier 2. So
My understanding, though, in talking with the Wrangell mayor, was that the state only had $5 million last year in Tier 1.
that's the thing. So every year, if you incrementally look from 1997, when this transfer went through, by 2007, all municipal harbors that was their goal, of which we were the last one to match within Service Area 1. Every year since then, it has incrementally increased. This year, there were $23 million in requests put forth for the Municipal Harbor Match Grant, and $4.6 million was actually funded. So during Palin's era, she decided not to even do anything one year. So it is, that is also part of it. So here's poor Wrangell wanting to replace Heritage Harbor, and they put out a bond to come up with their $5 million match, and they weren't, they didn't get the grant. And so here they are sitting around waiting for maybe next year. And it's interesting, but you don't automatically go to the top of the pile from year. So a lot of times what will happen is you can't wait around, you got to replace, and you end up fully funding your own replacement.
And that speaks to, I wouldn't be so willing to concede that we take less money if they take Entrance Island off the table, because the amount of money they offered us to begin with was unreasonable. And I would just say, fine, take Entrance Island, but we still want the $732,000.
Well, that's an approach, but I don't think we're going to get very far with that.
First off, I totally agree with you. Trying that approach is a negotiation. Second, and part of it applies to you, Glo, so thank you for staying there. It seems like two things. I'll refer to Papke specifically. I don't think it should be an if we find a way to make that borough thing. I think it's a how. We just need to find a way how to do it. So there's a big upfront money. But beyond that, tying into you and harbor stuff is long-term maintenance, staffing, all the logistics that go into your world, to put it simply, yeah?
Well, yeah, and you know, as a department head of an enterprise fund, I'm the closest thing you have to a business, right? Everything that we do has to at some point make sense, as opposed to, say, the general fund. So I think it would, you know, maybe it's something that maybe the general fund wants to take on. And you have an avenue of taxation, and that money can apply. In the harbor's vote, everything that we do, we have to user fees. I mean, the harbor is not based on general fund, right? We don't get money from the general fund to to do all these things.
And Will, can I slip the question in there that I had with it, though?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Just how does Wrangell do it? They have such a large geographic distance from, like, Myers Chuck, for instance. Like, how does that impact their harbor?
You could call the people in Myers Chuck and see what happens. Not much. They have the money, and not much has happened out there.
How does it work from, like, the harbor department point of view? Like, how is that impacting them, having such a large geographic distance from, hub?
Nothing. They're not doing anything. I mean, I think he's been down there once to visit, just to see what kind of a situation they have. But they're
not being
they don't have
controlled,
any,
though, or anything like that. They're like
no.
Just,
as opposed to, say, the Sitka Borough, who has
Baranoff, right?
Baranoff Warm Springs, and they have actually gone through the process of hiring, so to speak, a person out there that oversees, and they are collecting moorage, and they do have enforcement powers, things like that. But those facilities are so different than what we have. Yep. We have a float that's
totally
2 floats that, I don't know how you could.
I'm just trying to think outside the box.
I know, and this is so healthy. I've always been completely, before this, I've been through this process 3 times and are pretty knowledgeable into it. And I think it, like all of you said, it would be a really healing process. But it's maybe not a matter of if, it's how. And it's great that we're setting out questionnaires and coming up with people's ideas. And bottom line is how I figured out that you're looking at, these numbers that the engineers came up with, I got to say, aren't inflated. I've been through building harbors now for quite a few years, and they're spot on. The first thing that Dick Somerville looks at when a bid opening, I look at the bottom line. He looks at how close his engineers came into being in line with what was proposed, and they're right on. For the most part, they're right on. That's how they get business, and so those numbers that they've thrown out there are right on. When you start building floats, you're looking at $200 a square foot. You start talking those numbers, and $1 million for each of those facilities, $1.3 million is right on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it comes out to 2.4
So then you start
million.
talking about, okay, what is it going to cost me to come up with a portion of an employee? You're going to talk about a portion of, equipment, having, and I'm looking at probably really conservatively with a facility that is pretty much up to speed, probably $130,000. So what does that look like? Am I going to raise moorage within the harbor for Kurt and the mayor and a few other guys that have, that have stalls to subsidize this? How's that going to go over? So these are all things that we get to talk about, and let's do it.
Well, and just
Steve, do you have a comment?
just kind of to speak to the whole general fund issue, that's one of my concerns from the other side of this, which is what's the priority of the assembly and the community? Is it the hospital? Is it the $500,000 a year that we're going to have to come up with for the school? Or is it Papke's and Kupernoff?
$550,000 a year.
So, that's the things coming down the road here. I think Papke's and Kupernoff are both valuable facilities. The problem is, how do we pay for it? When we have a hospital out there that has been very open with the assembly about needing some money, and a school district we've been funding with Secure Rural Schools money that is likely not to be there anymore. Those are really big issues that the community and the assembly are going to have to give us some direction on.
Thank you for complicating that, Steve.
I'm sorry.
Now we get the bigger picture. But
Can I make a comment? Hey, I was not inferring that, you don't need to come back up the podium, I'm just saying, I'm not saying that they inflate the cost of what it would actually be to put in a usable float system. What I'm saying is that they're going to give you the Cadillac. And I'm not sure that we, need the Cadillac at these places. That's what I was getting at. That's what I was,
Well, they're going to
that's what I meant to
replace,
say.
they're going to replace, at our direction.
Yeah, right,
I mean,
exactly,
should we say we
exactly.
want sub-Cadillac, they'll do it.
Yeah.
But-
I mean, so maybe what we need to do then is
I don't
maybe
necess-
just for the exercise, we should say, we take our, what do we say, $500,000 and say, okay, Kupanoff, you get 250, Papke's, you get 250. You guys get together there and think, come up with a plan on what you can do with 250. Kupanoff, you do the same thing. I mean, just to start the conversation, and then we can then decide how, it's going to be legally binding for them to own those things into perpetuity. So, I mean, just for that. Just for the sake of conversation.
Yeah, well, you're making a point that I was thinking about, is that goes back to the Corps of Engineer permits for those two facilities too. And I've seen the Corps permit for Entrance Island and Papke's. I've never seen the one for Kupanoff. Is it? But my only thought process is that under those two permits, and I don't mean for you to answer it now, but it's a question I think we're going to have to answer in the future, is under those two permits, would we be allowed, for instance, just to go in and to replace the floats without doing anything else? There's some other questions here that, under the Corps, and I don't mean for them to be answered now, but I think it's something before I'd be willing to make a decision. I'd like to have a little more information.
Probably could come into, I don't know what the best way would be. I mean, I still think we need people that use the Papke's facility to be involved in this discussion, and the city of Kupanoff and the borough. And how can we make this work? Because like we've been saying, it's not if, it's how, but maybe it's not feasible. Maybe we can't make it work. And whether we just do just a float at Papke's and leave the ramp and the pier, then is there a liability because it's substandard? And if it's our ownership, then if someone gets hurt, then I suppose we're liable for the suits. And so there's a lot to look at. Maybe it's a discussion, I don't know how to reach out to the users and get more input, but I think that's the next best step.
Yeah. Could we put a little survey on our website there just to let people respond? But I think the real question is how we pay for it,
Well, we kind of sent the letter out asking what, rank what you want, and then I don't know if we should just have a public meeting just on this issue. I could say that since I'm leaving in a week. But,
Thank you so much, Mark.
But I think it's, knowing there is a timeline where the state's just going to say, well, take it or leave it, or we say, no, we don't want it at all. And then, if, the discussion has come up where they're going to demo Entrance Island, if they're in ownership of the other two facilities and they don't meet the standard of safety, then they'll potentially be closed down as well. And then we're at that point. What do we do?
Mr. Mayor, pertaining to Entrance Island, it seems to me like a chainsaw and a little tow job over to a beach someplace and a bonfire would pretty much take care of that issue without having to get, it's not much. I've been there.
No, I've been there a number of times.
And so, if it's going to cost us $200,000 for some professional outfit to go in there and remove it and do something with it, I think there's probably cheaper ways of doing it if we get the full $700,000, so.
I guess that's a approach too, but then if you do it and if we're responsible for removing it, and if it's a broke-off piling under the water and someone puts a hole in their boat, are we liable for that? I mean, there's a lot of different things to look at, but I mean, it's all part of our discussion, I think.
Yep.
So, what does the Assembly think we should do to continue this discussion? Should it be on every agenda as a discussion item like we did with the marijuana, or?
There were some good results.
What's that?
We need to put it somewhere where they'll talk about it now instead of a week before the state's going to shut her down.
Well, we need to have the discussion because, within, who knows, a year for sure, we'll probably have an offer of no money.
Has Lection ever offered you to come down and talk publicly?
He asked him to come, and he said he couldn't travel.
Oh.
But maybe, since we're at this part of negotiations, we should reach out to him and tell him we had this discussion. And didn't go anywhere really, except that we want the facilities to stay in place. I don't know, what do you think, Steve?
Well, first of all, I don't think Mike's the decision maker. I mean, no offense to him, but he can't write checks.
But he does know that he can say yes or no when you enter into this agreement. The ramifications, those questions is what I'm thinking more of.
Maybe there should be a pointed question asked of the department. If the borough takes over 2 facilities, the 2 Papke's and Kupernoff, can we give ownership to an association if they form one of Papke's? And I'd be kind of hesitant about that, because if they go belly up, then who's it fall back on us?
Well, and also, because that being said, that we're the ones that are eligible for these matching funds.
Oh, good.
Right.
We're the ones on the hook for.
Yeah.
Right, so those entities wouldn't be potentially, yeah.
No.
So those are a few questions we can ask, but.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I was just going to ask Glo about
leave yet.
Kupernoff. Would Kupernoff be eligible? Does it have to be a government
Not for
entity?
matching.
Only
No,
us?
I mean, as of now, but they might be, you never know.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of an odd duck. Ours are really an odd duck.
Okay.
And maybe rules will change.
Okay.
Eric, sorry.
Well, to ensure that all of the users who are utilizing these facilities were able to have an input, I love the idea about placing things online, but as we've seen, all of the community members are not always keen on using those facilities, or kind of seeking out ability to be able to create or share their opinions. So if we were to perhaps maybe just do a posting at each of those docks, the facilities themselves, with these right here, perhaps that could be a driver for them to then, go further and, dive into the state or borough website and provide their recommendations to us. I liked what Member Woolhutter had mentioned about, provide an opportunity for people to become involved and think about it, and say give them $250,000 a piece, and what could we do with that? Like you mentioned, and we don't need a Cadillac facility. Yes, it's nice. It would be great to have one that lasts 30 to 50 years. But can we afford it now? It doesn't sound like we can. So it would be an interesting topic, I think, to be able to open up to the public to figure out if and how to figure it out, instead of just the 7 of us trying to bang it out.
How can we reach out to the users of the facilities? Kupernoff obviously has got a representative here in the room, but what about the lodges that use the Papke's facility?
Well, first of all, I did want to say that I haven't sent this out to the Kupernoff clerk yet, but had planned to, and certainly can post. I was going to ask all department heads to post this. I can certainly post something out at the Papke's dock, or post these questionnaires with, you can get copies here at the borough or whatever. But I wanted to say also that I keep hearing the $250,000 to them. It's easy when we're talking Kupernoff. Who is them when we're talking Papke's? I mean,
Petersburg.
Users.
yeah. Yes, the users, which is who. I mean, that's an easy thing to say, but it's...
And we might not be able to give money to who are them.
Exactly.
From the state, grant money.
Those
so.
people.
Yeah, that's...
So I think it's something we need to discuss and advertise that we're discussing it and garner input, but then all along, just like the manager said, we've got these looming debts that are going to come our way with no money to cover them potentially, so.
And I have sent the questionnaire to KFSK. I certainly can put it in the newspaper if you would like me to, have it printed in the newspaper.
Can't hurt to circulate it through there once, I suppose.
Okay.
Does that sound good to the Assembly? I think we need to get as much input as we can. Cindy, you had another comment?
I was just going to say, a subject like this, I would really like to see at some point, even just a roundtable discussion that we invited the public to, whether we did it at the library and just had a few staff people and gave a couple presentations about this is what it is, and said we're not going to make a decision at this meeting, we're just laying out some of the things that we have to weigh, and we want to hear from you what's important to you, and if you have any ideas for how we can make this work.
And it'll also be nice to convey the facts to them, what we can do. If we can get them in convey ownership, or if we can't. If we can't, then it changes the whole scenario. Okay, is that enough Pappy's Landing, Kupernoff entrance island debate we talked about earlier? Now we have one other item on the agenda, discussion items, and Member Lagadakis asked to have this on there. It's AML summer meetings, August 16th through the 19th. I won't be attending, I'll be fishing, so. And Bob, is there anything, you're on the, you're on a committee?
I'm on the policy committee.
Policy committee, is there, I haven't.
There was a 3-hour session on looking at changing a couple of the policies. Actually, they were to send out a number of those to the different boroughs over Alaska, looking at to see what other changes we might want to make. And you should be getting that any time, Steve.
And I see they extended their room block till tomorrow. If a person, if you or Cindy decide to go, I know it's been 8 years ago or something like that. Can't remember exactly what year, but the council at the time there's a bunch of us wanted to go to AML, and a couple people on the assembly didn't want that to happen. We actually voted to make travel within the state. Just if a member wanted to go, if they had a legitimate reason, they could, but out of state had to be voted on by the body. So I don't know if that still holds true today. I mean, I haven't seen anything we've talked about transforming from city to borough that we've addressed that, but I don't know if it's a big issue. Is there still money in the travel budget?
Yes. Plus, it'll be a new budget, but it might get paid for with the new budget. We just have to see. We're pretty close.
Well, and we also have done some things for cost savings. I stayed with my husband when he was living in Juneau, and didn't take per diem, so.
That helps.
I'm really torn on this because I'm on the Sustainability Committee. I'm not sure after session is over how much effect we're going to have, but I don't know how far they're going to get through the budget discussions. I really wanted to talk a little bit about whether we thought as a group that the Sustainability Committee still has the possibility of a state sales tax on their plan, and I would really like to see that option taken off. I'm not.
Are those coming back, Cindy, for borough comments, municipality comments in Alaska? The options?
We sent them out after we had developed them, but we were the representatives of our community. I don't think we asked communities to adopt them and put them forward in their local papers and to comment on ADN, but other than that, and you can see what amazing effect it had on our legislature. But yeah, so that's pretty discouraging. But two of the things that they have on their recommendations are the possibility of changing the oil taxes and also the state sales tax. And I'd want to have stronger language on the oil tax and say no to the state sales tax because it does affect the smaller communities.
And whether this is the AML Sustainability Committee or the AML, the Municipal League would have an effect on what the legislators do. I would find it, they're talking about the oil taxes daily, and they're not budging at all. No, don't appear to be. So if a person thinks it's worthwhile to go, I'm fine with it. And you're the representative, you're on the committee, and Bob's on the.
I'm just a little frustrated. I have air miles, but I'm tempted to save them for something else.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think it's very important to attend AML. Actually, I think the new enrollees
thought about that too.
That they have, AML puts on, looking at what you can and can't do as a public official. I think it's
newly elected officials.
Yeah, outstanding, and it's well worth our expense for sending anybody who comes onto the assembly.
I don't think they're doing that in Wasilla, though, don't they? Do that
No, but I'm just saying, as far as AML goes, I have some of Cindy's concerns, not from the travel standpoint, but how effective we're doing with some of this. I know from our perspective is that anytime there's an issue comes up on the, to the legislature, they immediately go back to these policy decisions which we've come up with and use that as their basis of which they're going to respond, AML is going to respond to. So in that respect, it does have I think it has a very strong impact. And if any of you have worked in Juneau or Washington, you know that these things happen, within 6 hours. And that's the only, they can't get back to the membership, so they essentially use this as saying, this is AML's position. So, and there's two issues on the policy part that I really think need to be looked at. One is the fish tax. I think we need to respond to that when it comes out. And the other one has to do with the same issue Cindy's talking about on the oil taxes.
So, any other discussion on anybody attending AML? If you guys think it's Nancy.
I have no desire to attend. They can use my travel funding for, but I think somebody should go because without somebody there, we have no representation at all.
Well said.
And it should be somebody who's not afraid to speak up, not me.
So I will not be attending either, Mark, so they can have my travel funds.
No, I think it's important to have a footprint there. I think it's,
Right.
as long as somebody's there, I think we're good.
So you have till through tomorrow to make hotel reservations. So, any other discussion items? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
move. All those in favor say aye.
Ran out of years ago.
It's almost